Good evening, everyone. It is 7:33 on the 9th of February, 2022. And we have, it's Wednesday evening, and we are going to go into a work session. And first, I think we should do our usual. Thank you, Maddie, again, for always having the flag up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, folks, straighten the camera. We have a busy work session. We have some guest appearances from folks that I haven't seen in a while. Always a pleasure. And are there any trustee announcements? While not on the agenda, I always like to do them that we want to share. Folks, anybody? We're good? I feel like I was supposed to talk about something, but now I can't remember. I would only encourage, again, as I do throughout the month, Black History Month, lots and lots of events in our village, the town of Ossining, and throughout the county. Really interesting stuff in Ossining, most interesting, as always. But there's a really great stuff going on. Bethany and the ACP is running things. So just look at the web blast that Jamie Hoffman sends out every 2 weeks, and there's lots of information. And the only other thing I wanted to say is right before this meeting, or half hour ago, we had our meeting with the Youth Advisory Board. Manuel Casado was with me, Assemblywoman Galoff, and of course, thanks to Jamie and Karen. Maddie, you were on there too, yeah? And, you know, it was our first sort of go around with the presentation. So that worked out really well. Youth Advisory Board is, it's going to be on our website, so you could see the recorded version. And it's very informative. It's the first time in 30 years that we have put, not we, but the county actually, first one in the county to have a youth advisory. Some people in the community know that there are a number of people who've been waiting a long time for this, and this is all about our youth, and it's all about connecting our youth with opportunities for themselves and the community in the future. So all really good, exciting stuff. Mike Garcia, who you may see some emails from him, looking for advisory board candidates, looking to connect with as many mentors and as many people in business and all different fields, looking for grant writer possibly to help as a volunteer. So I thank everybody for being there, especially staff who was at the meeting at 6, is now on this meeting, making it all happen and go so smoothly. So thanks everybody. And I think turning it over to Village Manager Diatori. Hello.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. So first up, we have one of 2 presentations from our volunteer boards, and I would like to introduce Claude Tust of the Board of Ethics to present to the Board of Trustees a brief presentation on the Board of Ethics and what they're doing and what they may need help with from the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Manager, and all trustees. This is my first appearance before the trustees through a series of people leaving the Board of Ethics. I became chairman rather rapidly after joining the board. And as I know you know this, but the first point I feel I have to make is the really sad state of the population of the Board of Ethics. Our board currently consists of 2 people. We have, by the creating legislation, we are supposed to be 3 to 5 people. 3 is a quorum, so we don't even have that. So currently there is not a functioning Board of Ethics for the village of Ossining, and it's not even so simple as appointing only 1 person, because we are required to have at least 3 residents of the village, and I am not a resident of the village. So we would need to appoint at least 2 people, both of whom are residents. And we are also required to have at least one non-lawyer on the board. And currently both members are lawyers. So before we are able to do anything, we need to reconstitute the membership And I know you're working on it, Mayor, and I'm not suggesting that anyone is holding back or not doing his best, but you should be aware that we're just not able to do anything in our present state. So that is the first point of my presentation. The second, on a much sunnier note, is I wanted to point out, I see Stuart Kahn is present, how much of a help and a pleasure it is to work with him, his capacity as Corporation Counsel. He makes life a lot easier for the board, and we're very pleased to have him as someone to lean on in our deliberations, though he doesn't participate in the deliberations per se, of course. And the third point I just want to bring up for the benefit of the trustees, for them to be aware of it, and also for Stuart to be aware of it. Most of the requests or the complaints that we get have to do with things that I and the rest of the board have regarded as traditional and proper subjects for the board to opine on. That is to say, people making complaints about allegedly unethical conduct by particular employees or agents of Ossining, or people with requests for advisory opinions about the conduct or behavior proposed or having taken place by an individual employee or agent of the village. But of late, in the past year, a growing number of requests that have come to us have been for advisory opinions having to do with proposed action by the Board of Trustees as a whole, or by other groups within the village as a whole. And obviously, I'm not going to go into details about who's made these requests or what the subjects have been in particular in detail. But I think you should be aware that for a couple of reasons, these are not opinions that the Board of Ethics is in a position to render, even if we were fully up to speed and able to operate. The legislation that creates us talks about conduct by individual employees or agents of the village, and not boards or other groups constituted within the village. And besides that, we're just not in a position to express an opinion as to how an elected board should operate. Particularly, for example, if someone says to us, would it be ethical for the board to enter into such and such a contract with such and such a contractor? That's not a question that we are able to answer in the current state of our remit. We do not have the power to say that the Board of Trustees should not enter into such a contract. If we are asked whether one or more individual trustees has a conflict and would have to recuse him or herself from voting on a contract, that is certainly something where we can render an advisory opinion and would be prepared to do so. But we cannot opine, as I and in the past my fellow board members have viewed our legislation, we cannot opine on the desirability or ethical status of proposed board action. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of everyone present. If you think that is a power that we should have, and I'm by no means suggesting that I think so, or that I'm lobbying to expand our remit, but if you think it is something we should be in a position to do, then you would have to think about amending the legislation that constitutes us. As we are presently constituted, neither I nor any of the other members of the board believes that we have the power to respond to such requests for advisory opinions, other than by saying we can't respond. So that was the third point I wanted to make tonight, and I think I've used up my 10 minutes, and I thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Claude. Very much appreciate it. First of all, welcome, because We don't really get to see the Board of Ethics folks. Frankly, we're not supposed to. Most councils and most councils and boards, the volunteer boards, there are a lot of similarities and common threads. They're not all exactly the same. Here is a case in point where you can live beyond the village. We changed the rule because we need some attorneys and non-attorneys, and there's no liaison to the Board of Ethics per se, because sometimes the questions that they look at have to do with actually an elected official in the village. And so that would seem impractical. So it's one of the boards that simply doesn't have a liaison. If there's a problem, as you heard, the chair or anybody else will contact Stuart Kahan. Stuart is not a member of the Board of Ethics, even though he's an attorney. He's not a liaison, but he's a go-to person, as you heard, because there has to be some go-to person if somebody has a question or comment. I do hear loud and clearly, we do know that there's a shortage. There were a number of instances, somebody that actually passed on. Somebody had moved out of Ossining, and for a series of reasons. So we will be interviewing people. We do have a couple of people that are interested, and we will try to do that. We have that on our front burner. So again, thank you, Claude, and let me open it up to my colleagues on the board and see if anyone has comments or questions. Anyone?
I just
Okay.
want to say thank you to Claude for being part of the ethics board. So I do appreciate your time on this, and I'm going to say it as the mayor mentioned, we are looking to bring more people on board to this particular board as well. So I know it's critical. So thank you.
I'm grateful to the board for its support, and eagerly look forward not to dealing with complaints. Obviously, I'd much rather that there were never complaints, but to dealing with whatever's necessary and to being of service. And I understand that you're working as hard as you can to fill up the board, and I certainly hope that will take place in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks. Does anybody else have? I just don't see any hands up or anybody. Omar,
I also just want
please.
to echo gratitude, Claude. Thanks for coming.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your work. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're good. And thanks, Claude. You are welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting. I usually say that, and most people politely say that they appreciate the invitation, and then I don't see them for the rest of the meeting. But you're certainly welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you so wish. It's a public environment, and I don't really get to see you very often, so I think it's sort of nice to see the member of the Board of Ethics. All right, I think Manager Diatori, I think we have another presentation from another volunteer.
Yes, we do. So next is a presentation by Pat Yost, who is the chair of the Recreation Advisory Board. So welcome, Pat.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
Hello, Pat. Welcome.
Hey there. So Maddie, you gonna share? Awesome.
There it goes.
Thank you. Fantastic. So first of all, I want to say on behalf of the Recreational Advisory Board, thank you very much to everybody for, over the course of the past year, your ongoing support in, the village and the town have a huge, wonderful, asset in all of the parkland and all of the recreational facilities across the geography. And so, the Recreation Advisory Board really is, excited to be able to, support and provide input and, provide some suggestions, right? So, first of all, just for people, one, the general public, and two, people don't remember that, this is actually one of the few intermunicipal boards. It's an advisory board and includes representatives from the town of Ossining, the village of Barcliff, and the village of Ossining. So that, they're kind of like the town outside. And over the course of the last year, we've added several new members, which is fantastic. We've, got a fairly, strong, fairly full board. We still have a couple of open positions, but we feel really good about the broad broad group that we have, the people we've added over the course of the last year to add, additional diversity and to bring the numbers up, and it's working very well. We want to also, thank, Bill Garrison, who I believe I saw him join. He's a great and really helpful in terms of helping the board kind of talk about the right topics and bring us information. And then we have the two liaisons. Trustee Quezada has been the liaison for at least a year now, and then Councilman Minichio recently was named the liaison to the board from the town, which is great. So, okay, next slide. Just to we discuss issues, opportunities, challenges, and policies related to all of these, wonderful, fantastic community assets, right? We really try to spend a fair amount of time focusing on, how do we maximize the use and the value and the benefit of all of these fantastic resources to the entire community. And so we have significant discussions and provide input on programming and use and policies and issues that are brought to the Rec Advisory Board's attention. And, a big focus over the course of the last year or two for us has been, really kind of trying to spend a fair amount of time and energy and effort, talking about how do we make all of these assets, sustainable. And, we talk about the 20-year view or the 30-year view. And a lot of that has to do with capital and how do we spend capital and prioritize capital, and from that perspective. So it's fantastic. Next slide. So these are kind of like the next two pages are really sort of like the key. So over the course of the last year, we did conduct monthly virtual meetings. We found that those were very, very helpful. We used to have a dead period during the summer where we didn't meet because they're always in person and people were traveling. But I think we're actually, we've done very well, and we've met every month, including the summer months. We did from that perspective. We actually did have an in-person meeting once this year outdoors at Cedar Lane Park. We had to postpone it once because of the weather, but it was really great to see everybody in person. We did a significant tour of the facility and talked about potential improvement opportunities at Cedar Lane, even though that's a town park. But but while we were at the meeting, we did get a status update and provided a significant amount of input to on the Nexus report for potential inputs to the Caputo, the recreation center, which is very timely given the focus over the course of the next couple of months, which is the DRI. Talked about the budget piece so far. We talked a lot. Pretty much, there's a agenda item every month regarding programs, policies, schedules, and use. Right, trying to we talked a fair amount about some new programs, either with the library, within the park systems, plantings, and new programs at the youth. From a youth perspective at the community center, we started a gymnastics program and things like that. Trying to expand the offerings from a village in town and everyone's. Talked a little, fair amount of discussions about COVID, and especially related to summer camp adjustments and execution, which were, which Bill and the crew did a fantastic job of adjusting on the fly, as that was a moving target. And then we spent a fair amount of time talking about safety related items and usage guidelines and fees, and provide an input from that perspective, and maintenance and upgrade activities. At the end of the year, our December meeting, we did what we feel is actually a fairly important sort of oversight component of the Recreation Advisory Board. We had presentations from the youth sports organizations within the village. They really talked about, we asked them to come in and talk about what's their focus, what kind of oversight do they have, talk about how the board functions, asked to walk us through financially how they're standing, where they spend their money, do they spend it on the appropriate things, and ask them for what do they need, right? And we talked about, we talked to Ossining Little League Football, we talked to Renee Soccer, the AYSO Soccer, and we talked to the Jesse Collar Youth Sports, Baseball and Softball. So they came in and provided some we did a little bit of, oversight from that perspective, and we felt really good about the direction of those three organizations, and that they've, they're focused on the right things, and in terms of training and safety and youth participation and to as many people as possible. All right, the next page. So this year, as I'm sure a bunch of your time is taken up these days, we think, there is a component of the DRI which relates to potential spending within the community center. And so as a recreation advisory board, we spent a fair amount of time. We spent a little bit of time in January, more time actually on Monday, in our session on Monday. And then we'll talk about it again in March around really around the community center, and make some recommendations around what do we feel are good priorities and good spending, and how do we really think about taking the community center forward. One, bringing it up to the 21st century, but two, making it a really forward-looking, set it up for use over the next 20 to 30 years, right? Talk about that. Other topics that we have identified to make sure that we're talking about over the course of this year are ongoing parks maintenance and upgrade schedules. Work with, understand from Bill, they're putting in place like a maintenance program to help kind of, codify some of the activities and things like that from that perspective. Ongoing discussions as appropriate related to camp execution and other programming items, adding new items, where there are potential challenges related to scheduling or capacity. We'll try to provide input on those. Clearly, facility and park safety, use and cost, and other topics that come up. And then when it comes around to budget time, we'll provide input on capital spending and suggestions for the next year, right? And then I think a topic that everyone talks about, but this is much more town focused, is related to the waterfront use and coordination across municipalities from that perspective. So, and then the last page is really just a map of all the different parks that we've got, just to remind people of just how widespread and how much of a wonderful asset the parkland is for the town, the village, and the two villages from that standpoint. So, I think we feel really good about where we are. We feel good about the participants on the board and the help and the support that we get from Bill and the parks and recs departments in both the town and the village, and from the board of trustees. You've chosen to make investments in improving things, and looking forward to make sure that both the youth within the town and the village, within the village, really get great opportunities, but then also they're not just for the youth, right? We serve the entire population, and so we really try and focus in on adult activities and use from that perspective as well, and broader family use as well. So once again, just to sum up, thank you very much for all your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Pat. I met Pat, I think, may have been before, but I think we basically met on the committee when I was the liaison for the Reg Advisory. Loved the committee. It's great when the town and village sort of work together on something. It just takes on a different sort of tone and a different the content and context. It's really cool. So and it's the Parks and Community Center. Thank you for everything. I'm going to open it up. Thanks for the presentation. Always good, and you guys are always so well prepared. So much appreciated. And let's go to the gallery and see if anybody would like to comment or have any questions for Pat.
Thanks, Pat. Oftentimes when we're talking about the kind of scope of responsibility that we have, we think about living, working, and playing in Ossining. And the playing is one that I feel like people don't give enough credit for. And the work that y'all do on the Rec Advisory Board ensures that people of all ages in our community have a place where they can unwind, relax, connect, and decompress. And particularly in this time when being inside was something that people were concerned about and were looking for outdoor spaces, it really underscored the preciousness that having outdoor spaces, playgrounds, parks, sitting areas, green space it really has for our community. So thank you for the work that you and the Rec Advisory Board do. Not only do you do it faithfully and continuously, but you also do it in partnership with the town. And I think that that is a really unique thing that should be lifted up as an opportunity for perhaps other boards to work with their cousin boards in the town or in Briarcliff and other places. So thank you for all your work, and I look forward to being helpful however I can be.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Anyone else?
I do, Mayor. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to go.
No, please go on.
Great. Pat, thank you so much for all the work you do. We met Pat we meet Pat a bunch of times, even in person. Through the pandemic, we did much other stuff besides the Rec Advisory Board. So I do appreciate all the work that you have done on this committee, but throughout the village itself. Your involvement in our communities, very appreciate that. One of the things while you were going through presentation, the last page kind of it was interesting. It's always interesting, to see all the parks between. I want to say the parks throughout Austining. Okay, it's Austining itself. Forget about the village and the town throughout Austining. And I want to piggyback in one of the things that my colleague Omar mentioned, through the pandemic, and how outdoor spaces and workability was so important to our lives. And I guess this question goes to my fellow members and here, but I think something is missing out of that. And Sing Sing Kill Trail. We always talked about, how awesome of a project this was. How an engineering project became such a amazing piece of our village, because everybody, I think I want to say at least 99% of village residents have walked that path. I hope I'm right, at least 99.9, and plus other people around Westchester have come. We got awards and everything else, but I don't remember, with previous presentations, we talked about a linear park. We said, what was a linear park? What does that mean? What does that function look like? And I'm just throwing this out, okay? And probably this is a deeper conversation that Stuart can help us out, the definitions of this. This is not a parkland designation. But maybe we should treat it as a park. We should make it another park within a village as well, because we are using this as a park. We are using this as a trail. We are using this as a connectivity to different, to points of our village. And we are talking about another project that we are actually thinking about having another connection to this. So again, I'm just throwing it out there. We don't need to talk about it right now, but I think I would like to pick the discussion, obviously, Pat, with you in a more formal setting from the Rec Advisory Board, and also would like to bring that in front of the village board and see what that looks like and what that means. That's all. Again, Pat, thank you so much. Thank you and all the members of the committee that are doing an amazing job for our community.
Yeah, Pat, I'm sorry if I cut you off. John, real quick. I echo my colleague's sentiments. We had a discussion with the Austining Arts Council, which I think would be a good thing for you guys to get together, maybe put our heads. I think that's where Manny was leaning a little bit, maybe, with the, I forget the name of the company. It was music, where they have instruments around parks. And I think this would be a good segue to tie you two guys together. And once DPW is done, we have a significant piece of property when it gets tied in up there that I think this would all fit together. And,
Yeah.
Bob, I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to go too much into the details, but yes.
Oh,
It
no,
was Harmony Park.
Yes.
I believe,
Right.
Bill and I did speak about it. I'm not sure if it made it to you, Pat, or if you guys were able to connect
Well,
with Mike about that.
actually it did. We talked about it on Monday, as a matter of fact.
So I don't need to know more good.
So yeah, so we actually talked about that at the Monday. It was one of the agenda items on the Monday Rec Advisory Board, because one of the things that we've as a group have talked about is, you know, how do we get into a regular maintenance cycle for all the playgrounds, right? I mean, we've got so many playgrounds across the town and the village, and the ongoing maintenance and replacement of that equipment and keeping it up, you know, so that it's safe and so it's accessible to handicapped individuals. And, you know, from that perspective, it's not a small feat. And so, you know, the course of the last year or so, we've talked about how do we get into like a regular sort of a maintenance cycle for those playgrounds, and how can that get baked into, you know, the 5-year capital plans for both the town and the village. And you know, we were looking at the capital plan on Monday and saw, you know, there's ongoing improvements, which is great because we need those, right, over time. And it's better to have those not be surprises and breakdown maintenance for everybody, right? And so, you know, we had an initial conversation around, you know, that's a fantastic idea, and it really is kind of cool. And you know, we asked the board to think about options and opportunities of where might you put something like that, right? Because, you know, it's like, you know, does it really belong in the middle of a, you know, residential area where everyone's going to be where it's going to be very, you know, a lot of music and noise, right? You know, so you put it right next to people's houses or not. And so we started the conversation, haven't gotten anywhere, but it's absolutely something under consideration. And it, you know, at first blush, we thought it was a fantastic idea.
Nice.
Yep.
Great. Well, anybody else? Did we go around the gallery? Dana?
I'll say something. I just wanted to thank Pat for, you know, being such a great leader for this group, and clearly very organized, very dedicated. And it's, you know, certainly, you know, nice to see someone who's a volunteer and put so much thought and effort into it. And we appreciate it. And I know that, you know, the rec center certainly is, you know, important. When during the pandemic, my husband went swimming almost every day.
Yeah.
And it became a real refuge for him and a place for him to, you know, to go and exercise and just have some kind of quality self-care time. But I don't, you know, I like to swim as well, but he was very religious about it. So, you know, it's great to have that there. And it's true what Omar said, that these parks are an outdoor oasis for people during these difficult times. So thanks again for all your work, and hopefully with the DRI process, we can see some, you know, significant changes to the rec center.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dana. Pat, just to wrap it up, my sort of larger, first of all, I'm a big fan of the community center because I think the word community is the bolded word in that, which is, I think it's the place that really does bring everyone together, that it's a place for all ages and backgrounds. And it's really, for me, a hub of our community, arguably many communities. And so we have to, it's a gem, and we have to really take care of it. And I'm glad that the DRI is available to be looked at as a resource. And I know that your team and your committee is going to look at that and have input into it. I sort of am interested in the linear park idea because, I mean, to me, linear parks are trails. They're not actually parks. It's an architectural term, or it's a developer's term, or it's a whatever. But it's an interesting idea to look at it because ours started in humble beginnings and became a very successful project. It's been in, you know, famous movie. I mean, it's like a big deal. So, and now it's going to be connected. It's going to connect more of our community. So I look forward to hearing some of that. My singular question, I think my colleagues have asked and commented, and I echo the words. I wanted to know if from this pandemic, which really isn't over yet, we just feel, I think, a little bit more secure. What's your key, or the committee, or your personal key takeaway that we need to keep top of mind for the next year or two in rebuilding things, in building, rebuilding, refacing, undoing? What is your key takeaway that we should keep in mind that's changed your thought about how the community center, the parks I think are obvious, but specific to the community center, that you want us to sort of walk away with?
So specific to the community center, I think there are probably like a couple, right, related to the community center that, as we've talked about, you know, how do you change it, and how do you make it ready for the next 30 years, right? One is, and you did speak to this a little bit about how it's a hub, right? And it's a hub not just for the youth of the village, and it's a huge hub for the youth of the village, but it's also a hub for a significant portion of the seniors within the village. I call them even the adult population within the village really relies on that for cost effective and interesting programming, when to provide opportunities when there aren't necessarily some elsewhere, right? So for me, one, the fact that there's so many people that can rely on that facility, whether it's for recreation in terms from a sport perspective, or recreation from a enrichment perspective with music or arts, or there's a gymnastics program going on down there for young kids, which is brand new, and introducing them to new things like that. So bluntly, right, there's a space problem down there. There are conflicts from a space perspective, and we couldn't do as much as we wanted to, relative to getting all of the groups in and through at the same time, especially in the winter when there aren't outdoor options for a lot of people, right? So that was one. The second one for me is that, and this one pertains primarily to the youth, right? And I think in situations where kids can't necessarily go to school, like or you've got challenges in terms of get people going home because they can't go to school, or how do you do that? We need a facility where kids can hang out and have an area to play and work out, but also have an area to do work, right? Potentially do schoolwork, right? All these kids got all these wonderful opportunities to do laptops and stuff like that, but not necessarily everybody had access to Wi-Fi, right? And so having additional space to provide that kind of an opportunity for people was important to us as a group. And I think you see that reflected in some of the suggestions from the Nexus, where there are a lot more areas within the rec center to kind of hang out, right? Especially like down where the pool tables are, and the youth area from that standpoint, from that perspective, right? And then I think the third is, and I really commend the village for taking this jump, and you mentioned it earlier, I think coordinating with the youth bureau and leveraging the facility and using that in a way to kind of help focus on the youth. Well, we still have a bunch of opportunity to leverage the community center, in leveraging the youth bureau, I think is going to be huge, right? To continue to do that. But, that kind of goes back to the first point, which is, as we do more with the youth bureau, you're going to have more constraints on the facility within the rec center. And so I think you'll hear the rec center talk about, how do we, even expand even more the capacity of the rec center, because of all the things, like if we think 10 years out or 15 years out, if we've got a huge youth bureau, really successful, but we also have an aging population that's using the space, they want to play pickleball, they want to do, get walking groups going in the winter or whatever, how do we make that? So.
Thank you, Pat. I chuckle at pickleball because the first time I heard about pickleball was when I was on this committee. I like thought they do something with pickles. I had like no idea. Apparently it's the fastest growing sport in the United States for
It
the
is.
past few
It really
years.
is, right? And
So I don't remember if you were on the board. You must have been because you were there before me, where we all looked at each other and said, I mean, I was like Googling pickleball. I didn't even know, but now we have it indoors, outdoors. It's
Yeah.
huge. So this is our ability to adjust to the community that we serve. I think it's great. So thank you for your volunteer work, as Dana had said, and everything else. Thank you so much, Pat. Always
Oh,
nice
thank
to
you.
see you. You too are welcome to stay for the remainder of the evening.
Thanks. I
If you
actually am interested in a couple of the agenda topics, so I'll just kind of put myself on mute and take myself off camera, and I'll listen in. But thank
Okay,
you
well,
very
Jamie's probably gonna move you to the attendees
gonna
if
find you.
if
Okay.
she is, and so glad to have you. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, village manager, we're on to the next exciting topic.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, as part of the state's steps to legalize recreational marijuana, the village has determined, the village board has decided to opt in for participation in marijuana dispensaries. So looking forward and thinking about this and how we'll implement it, we wanted to make sure that we were evaluating the zoning of this type of business very carefully and doing it in keeping with the information that's coming forward from the state through the marijuana
Regulatory.
Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. I apologize. Next up, our Director of Planning, Jaime Martinez, and our Corporation Counsel, Stuart Kahan, will take you through just the initial, an overview of the implications for zoning consideration
Thank you.
of dispensaries.
Good evening, trustees.
Good evening.
I'm going to share my screen so we can show a presentation. I want to start off the conversation before we get too deep into the presentation, which will be quick in respect of your time. At this point, we're not making any distinct recommendations on what to do. Rather, we're trying to convey how the current law affects the new availability for people to open up shops and some considerations you're going to want to think about in setting up in the new law. Setting up new zoning around this. So with that, summary: on March 31st, 2021, the recreational sale of cannabis was signed into law by the governor of New York. The introduction of the retail sale of cannabis creates a complicated questions about where municipalities should allow the siting of shops and what zoning regulations should look like to control their establishment in alignment with community desires. So for zoning considerations, there's some opportunities and some threats that come with the opening of these shops. For opportunities, there's the increased sales tax revenue. Adding a new zoning provides clarity in zoning that will enable some of these shops to open up quickly, which is important for any new burgeoning business to have the ability to sort of get a foot in the door. Means that they're not sort of spending money before they're actually able to make money. Potentially opening up these in a business district could potentially promote some foot traffic, which would support, for this type of business, most likely fast retail or sort of fast food dining in that district because of the extra foot traffic. And adding this to the zoning code will allow the use to be reasonably restricted instead of allowing it sort of kind of where anywhere retail is currently allowed, including circumstances where we have pre-existing non-conforming retail uses in districts that you probably wouldn't want to see this in. So some of the threats that this type of shops create is that they're likely to have a significant parking demand, something more akin to a CVS, where there's a lot of people coming in, waiting in line, needing to sit there. There is the potential for people to linger in the area after they go and make these purchases to use the product, and for a significant part of the public, it's likely to be viewed as a nuisance business. And so it's important to recognize that there are going to be, some people who don't want to have these types of businesses in their neighborhood. So some of the implementation concerns. Number one, we discussed this a lot internally. We feel that cannabis really should be classed as a separate use in order to avoid the potential for it to be used as an existing non-conforming retail use in residential neighborhoods. This would also require adding definitions for cannabis and for cannabis dispensary to the zoning code specifically. But I'm sure all of you are familiar with, stores, bodegas that are in your neighborhood that are sort of, smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood or a residential zone, and really aren't in conformance with that zone, but they've been around so long that they've kind of been allowed to stay there. And so reclassifying it would create a new use and would prevent that from moving into some of these areas where you have these existing uses. When making zoning decisions, consideration should be given to equity concerns and the placement of what may be perceived as a nuisance business. And so, not to get too deep into the details, a lot of the thought process behind the legalization of marijuana has been an evaluation of the impact on the Black and Latino community and the policing of this drug on those communities. And so, considering about where you're going to place these businesses, you're also going to want to keep that issue of equity top of mind when making decisions about where it goes. Consideration should also be given to whether this should be a special permit use, which under the zoning code now is a Board of Trustees decision. Conditional use permit, which is something that falls in the planning board under the code, or whether this is something that you want to be considered as sort of as of right use, which could, theoretically require site plan or could just require, a building permit. So continuing along with the implementation concerns, parking demand, really, if at all possible, should not be waived through variances. Zoning should be written in such a way as to make the operations impractical outside of districts with either village parking lots or with sufficient parking on site. Zoning placement should also focus on buffering from certain types of districts and uses. And these are just sort of illustrative numbers, but 250 feet from residential zones, 500 feet from schools and child daycare, 250 feet from places of worship. And another thing that you might want to consider is thinking about signage for this type of use that you might see and making sure that it gets special scrutiny, similar to other nuisance uses such as liquor stores, smoke shops, and the ordinance should be amended to adjust for this. So going right into the site planning aspect, again, if implemented as a distinct zoning use rather than just retail, and with approval granted through a conditional special use permit, site planning can review unique concerns for the use, such as parking, lighting, security, and signage. So, this is something that exists in California and in other states have legalized it for adding the special, site plan regulations and zoning for cannabis dispensaries. So the parking demand, due to a limited number of licenses initially, it's pretty likely that any stores that do open up will be serving a large area and will probably have a significant demand over other types of retail uses that you might see, and the parking requirements should reflect that. So, just keep in mind, if there are only 5 or 8 licenses throughout Westchester County, you're not just going to be marketing to people who are here in Austin. Likely you're going to be marketing to people that are, closer to this than the next store. So these are some images of, dispensaries on the day that they opened, Chicago, other places. So you can see there's significant lines. These places also have, significant parking demand after they open up right away. So that it's just something to consider. Currently under the code, retail and sales service uses, sales oriented, are requiring 1 space per 350 square feet of gross floor area in the BC district, which is the downtown, the RDD district, which is the riverfront development district, the Station Plaza North and the Station Plaza South and planned waterfront districts. For retail sales and service uses, sales oriented, there's one space per 250 square feet of gross floor area. In the PC, NC1, which is the Neighborhood Center 1, Neighborhood Center 2, general business, conservation development district, office research, and the IR district. So IR being the prison. So, you know, you're going to want to consider whether these types of parking requirements are sufficient to meet the demand of a cannabis dispensary. So next is lighting and security. New York State will, you know, probably require special security plans due to the nature of the business and the fact that it's still largely a cash business without access to the regular banking system. The security requirement may necessitate 24-hour lighting at any entry point in the facility, and zoning conditions should ensure proper screening and positioning to prevent any, you know, light from these properties from spilling over into adjacent properties. And all applicants should be required to submit a lighting and security plan to whoever the reviewing body is when they look to open up. Signage is another issue that you're going to want to consider. The current sign code really doesn't prevent what, you know, some people might consider to be offensive signage. So conditions should be implemented to ensure that any signs for these businesses are tastefully done or at a minimum are just innocuous and unremarkable. This is probably 100% what you don't want to see in terms of signage. You know, I think that there are probably a fair number of people who don't want to see this type of signage even. That might be a little too in your face. This is another dispensary that opened up. This is pretty innocuous. I think that, you know, this is the kind of signage that I think most people would not be offended by. And might be something that you would want to work towards. So thinking about location. So I'm going to say it probably for the third time, and I think it's actually comes up again in my presentation, but dispensaries really should be classified as a new use in order to prevent the use of existing non-conforming retail sites. You want to determine proper zoning placement. Really, I think by focusing first on buffering from certain types of districts and uses, and then really examining what's left. I think commonly, you know, you'll enter these conversations and say, okay, well, what's the right zoning district to put it in? But that can have unintended consequences. I think it's probably more important to think about what do you not want this to be around? And then once you've figured out the areas that you don't want it to be around, how far they should be from those types of uses, then you can sort of narrow down the available sites that are left in the village, and then figure out from there whether you want to put this in as a special zoning district overlay or just base it off the buffer. So, you know, some of the numbers that we've seen out there are anywhere from 250 feet to 1,000 feet from other residential zones, purely residential zones being like the T zone, the S50 single family, S100, S75 zones, anywhere from 500 to 1,500 feet from schools and daycares, 250 to 1,000 feet from places of worship, 1,000 to 2,500 feet from other dispensaries. And parking demand also should not be waived through variances if at all possible. You know, generally speaking, locations should be required to demonstrate the ability to handle the special parking demands through on-site parking or municipal lots or both. And you're going to want to maybe consider a special overlay zone, which is something that other municipalities in the state have already looked to implement. So what are other communities doing? It's always interesting to find out. So there are obviously a bunch of communities who opted out and they don't have anything, but there are some communities that have opted into dispensaries, but not on-site consumption. There are some that have, you know, allowed for both of them to go forward. So for the town of Cortland, they have a pretty restrictive system. They're only allowed on Route 6 in commercial or industrial zones. They're not allowed within 1,250 feet of another lot containing the cannabis dispensary. They're not allowed within 1,500 feet of a place of worship, school, nursing home, hospital, park, parkland, housing, nor any sort of housing, training, or places of employment for the mentally or physically handicapped, regardless of whether such facility is owned by or under contract to any governmental entity. Any signage shall contain only letters or numbers and shall be prohibited from including any images. No more than one cannabis retail dispensary per lot. And the zoning board of appeals shall not vary the conditions of the section. That last section is something I've never seen in the zoning code anywhere, but it is something that the town of Cortland did. And when I was speaking with somebody from over there, I asked them if, considering the restrictions were pretty strong, whether they'd be comfortable with no dispensaries ever coming in. And he, the response I got was they were kind of agnostic to it. So if nothing ever came, it wouldn't bother anybody over there. And I think the restrictions reflect that.
Who did you ask?
Ask the corporation council.
Okay, you didn't ask elected officials.
No,
who
I
represent the public. Okay.
No, I did not. Yeah, I asked corporation council. So City of Peekskill zoning restrictions, they're have kind of taken a different approach. They are allowed in commercial and industrial zones. They consider it retail use. It allows dispensaries and on-site consumption. And at this point, they have no special permit and no conditional use. That was presented to the council there, but they were not interested in moving forward with that. So their restrictions are, pretty much non-existent. They allow both there, and that's their next step moving forward. For the town of Warwick, this is actually one that Stuart found. Stuart found about 20. I did not add all of them, but tried to pull ones that we thought would be most relevant. They created the Cannabis Dispensary Overlay District and in the design, shopping, community business, and office industrial park zoning districts. This approval requires issuance of a special permit approved by the planning board. It includes a provision that the village may want to consider, which is a special use permit granted under this subsection shall have the term limited to the duration of the applicant's ownership and the use of the premises as a cannabis retail dispensary. And special permits may be transferred only with the approval of the planning board in the form of an amendment to the special use permit, which I think is intended to make sure that they're keeping an eye on the actual owner and operator of these licenses. And it regulates the hours of operation. And so that is my presentation.
Thank you. Can bring back to gallery, I think.
Yeah, I'll stop mentioning.
Great. I mean, I found this super helpful. Let me open it up for questions and discussions, or not. Anybody?
I can go first. I have 3 questions, maybe 2. So the first is in terms of the slide that talked about whether it would be special usage or as of right, et cetera, et cetera. I think the tricky thing is that you're asking us as a board of trustees, like which one of these would be the best. And my sense is that if you were to ask the planning board or the, I think the ZBA was the other one, the other body, they would say whichever one gives me the ability to say yes or no. And so if you were to ask us, then we would say, give us, we probably like the special usage, because then we can say yes or no. And arguably, we are accountable to the public as elected officials and whatever. One could make the argument for the other bodies. My question is there any context that you can add as to what the trade-offs would be for each one of those options?
Yeah, so I think the challenge for the board of trustees is that you are accountable to the elected, to the elections, right? And the planning board is accountable to the code. So they're obligated to follow the code. The code is something that you, the elected body, have to make a decision on. And so ultimately, when the planning board makes their decisions, they're going to do their best job, I think, to follow the letter of the law and make a decision based off of what the code dictates. For an elected body, if you have to make a decision that may be somewhat controversial every single time somebody wants to come and open up one of these districts, you're not just dealing with questions of code, you're also dealing with questions of, community sentiment. And so the planning board has to consider seeker questions about environmental impacts. They have to consider, whether or not these uses meet all of the criteria that they meet under the conditional use permit. But if a community member comes up to the planning board and says, well, I don't like this, and the code says that this person is allowed to do it as long as they meet this criteria, the planning board really can't vote no. And if they do, it's likely to get thrown out. I think here for the Board of Trustees, there are other considerations that you have to make when you make decisions. That's, I think, why you get to set the criteria for the code that ultimately determines how these decisions get made.
Okay, that's interesting. I look forward to what I am sure to be a robust discussion amongst my colleagues on that topic. And the second question is around signage. Where can I find the language around signage? Both like what would refer to this, but also in general, because as I kind of walk around the village, I have a lot of questions about signage and what signage should look like, and whether signage is the same thing as I don't think this is another technical word, but like frontage, like what a business looks like. You have the neon lights, you have this, that, and whatever. Like, is that the same thing as signage? That's two questions.
I mean, just real quick, signage is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I did sit on the board, and Stuart would probably correct me too. I think there's a percentage of what you have above that you could put signage, and then you're only allowed 25% window coverage, I believe, throughout the village. So as far as the signage up above the establishment, I'm not sure of the calculation or if there is parameters on it. I'm sure there is, but I mean, from what I remember, there's a calculation, I think, for above, and then and I know for a fact it's 25% coverage in your windows.
So there is a section of the code 270-29 that covers signs. And so the sign code is pretty much the same for most of the village, except for in the historic districts. The historic districts get extra scrutiny under the HBC. The sign code sort of dictates how signs can be. They're generally related to the size of the frontage of the street, kind of the way that Trustee Fritchie was talking about, as well as the, sort of like a number, a calculation on how much sign you can have. But there isn't a lot of detail in there about, what's in the sign. Not as robust as I think you would probably want. And the sign ordinance can be varied by the zoning board. So people have come forward for variances to the sign code in the past. And so, it's a long chapter. I can send you a link to that. I don't know if Stuart wants to sort of add any detail to what I just said there about signs.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, my general feeling is that there's a lot of inconsistencies in terms of signage across the village, and I think that's a separate conversation of, do we want to be more prescriptive about what signage in the village looks like? There are trade-offs to that, because who's paying for that? If we say that we want them to look different, are we paying for that? Are we asking business to pay for that? But okay, related to this, my general feelings are, I think the sentiment was in passing the legislation that we did, and saying that we didn't want consumption sites at this point, and that we did want dispensaries, is that we do want dispensaries. So that's different from what you were describing Cortland as being essentially them being kind of indifferent, perhaps, as to whether they come or not. My feeling is that we do want them to come, and we want them to be reasonable. The parking should be reasonable, the distance from schools and places of worships and whatever else, all of that should be reasonable. It should make sense. It shouldn't be something that doesn't make sense. At the same time, it shouldn't be so restrictive that it then is functionally impossible for a dispensary to be anywhere. But after doing all the calculations, if it turns out there's one spot where it can be in the village and we can get one dispensary, then fine. I'm not saying that we need a chain, that we need a ton, but I would like to bring them in to whatever extent it makes sense, and I would like it to make sense. That's it.
Thank you, Trustee Lopez. Anybody else?
Go ahead.
I think Dana was up actually.
No, go ahead. Dana.
At least she took her mute off. Dana, you have comments, questions?
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's a desire to highly regulate the location. And then there's, you know, there's like high regulation, no regulation, and something in between. But it seems like, you know, parking is going to be a huge thing. So you could say, well, downtown, let's have a dispensary down there. But, you know, there are obstacles. There are a lot of churches. There's not, you know, a ton of available parking like Arcadian has, for example. And it'd be nice to bring more people down there and more foot traffic. And so, you know, you have to decide what is the balance between economic growth and this regulation of this nuisance, my favorite, nuisance business. I wish we didn't have to call anything a nuisance business, except for maybe like, you know, a strip club or something, but I don't know. I just don't consider it a nuisance any more than your average liquor store is a nuisance. I think one of the first things we need to do is decide how far from these various schools and parks and churches, and we're gonna, if we have flexibility within that, it looks like there are state mandated minimum distances, but that the municipality is free to make those distances longer if they like. And so, you know, we have a lot of churches and parks and schools and, you know, and if this dispensary is going to go anywhere, I mean, and that's going to, you know, so the distance becomes pretty crucial as to whether you're going to be able to have dispensaries in a particular area at all. You know, part of me would like it to kind of be somewhere on the outskirts of the village, one end or the other. And people can come and shop and leave, you know. That's not helping the economy, particularly of other businesses, if that's what you're interested in doing. I think the equity aspect of it is fascinating because, you know, in Chicago, they've given, you know, they've had a bunch of dispensary licenses and hundreds, I don't know, in Illinois, and not one is a minority owner because it's extremely expensive. So, but I would like us to try and promote as much as possible the creation of a dispensary that benefits, you know, the people who have suffered from policies related to marijuana. But it's hard because it's expensive. So I'd like to get out my tape measure and start measuring the distance from every church. You know, no, seriously. I mean, it's like, how do you do that?
I do. You know, we have GIS, of course, in the village, so we can sort of plop in points that you want to. If you said, look, these are areas that we want to buffer from, I can create a whole list of maps showing what 250 feet, what 500 feet.
I would love that.
Uses.
I would actually love that, because until you know that, you can't zone. You know, I mean, until you've established distances and even the parts of the village that would be eligible to have a dispensary. So, you know, I would love to start seeing what that looks like. You know,
I agree with that, because I think when we originally discussed this, we talked about maybe 4 possibilities that made sense. And I think one was on the south end of the village, the north end of the village, the east end of the village, and the central of the village, like Washington Square or whatever. Take those 4 areas and you could put a map, like Jaime says, for those 4 areas. And maybe it's something for us to start with, to look at, and where that would fall into the zoning. an idea. I agree.
Okay, Manny?
Yep, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dana. And actually, before I go to the main topic, so Omar, if you want to talk about, if you want to see that we actually have architectural guidelines that were done in 2011. And if you go to the planning department's page, and if you want to go down to studies and resources, you'll find it there somewhere in the middle, actually the fifth one, I think, from the top. And that was done by Steve Tilley a couple of years, like I said, 2011. And that gives you a broad idea of what signage storefronts look like and different recommendations of what a lot of the characters of different neighborhoods, and especially on the historic portion of our downtown as well. Sometimes the code is a little bit more black and white, but when you see an illustration, it gives you a different picture, sure. So I think it'd be useful for you if you want. The link is there. So let's go back to the topic in hand right now. I agree with Dana. Jaime, the presentation was good. Thank you. I like the last slide that you did and sort of like what other municipalities are doing. But I think until, at least for me, and I think I don't want to speak from Dana, but I think until we actually see a map and what that looks like, I don't think I'll be able to determine what the regulations should or could look like at this point. I like the concept, but sort of, I like some ideas of all the 3 different municipalities that they're actually working on this right now. I'm not sure if I'm all on board what Peekskill did, but I definitely have some concepts of what they're trying to accomplish.
It didn't seem to do a lot, Peekskill. They seemed to be like, come on, guys.
Well, that's a lot. Come on, guys.
Exactly.
We're open
Yes.
for business and
So,
we're very flexible is an
yeah.
actual statement.
Yeah, exactly. So me personally, I again, until I see what 200 feet looks like, sure, in a map, 1,000 feet looks like, or when you start doing this, playing with geometry, you're going to start seeing different clusters of what that could look like. We talked about, they talked about commercial, industrial areas. So how many of those do we have? How many of those can we take advantage, if anything? Sure. When we talked about different potential locations of what a facility may be able to be there, and then, I'm assuming these are, if anything, so I'm just putting an idea out there. They may be going into an existing location. That existing location, as is, don't have enough parking. So I think, for me, until we actually start visualizing the potential locations and what that may look like, that to me that's when we should start having the discussion at hand and start putting the regulations as we see fit. But until then, this is a great presentation. Thank you, Jaime. Like I said, I like the last part, which gives you ideas of zoning regulations that we could establish.
I want to just quickly respond. Thanks, Manny, for pointing me in the direction of this resource. There's a map that shows the different district, the historic district, and so forth. And to me, just at first blush, there's 2 commercial arteries, the one in Highland Avenue, and then Croton Avenue, Route 133, so down Arcadian, etc. So we have kind of like north and south. And to me, those jump out as some of the most obvious places. You can imagine some of the lots near like where Dee Dee's Diner is, and like in those kind of places where there's space, there's not a ton of schools and churches and things. You have to kind of be aware of how it might affect. That's like an artery that goes right through the village, but as opposed to something that's much more dense. So, eager to see what Jaime brings us, but just at first blush, that's what is jumping out to me.
Great. Thank you. Just a couple of thoughts. So I agree actually with all the comments. We were very thoughtful in how we voted. Lots of conversation about it. More conversation. We have a public village hall meeting on the 5th Wednesday, comes up in March. That's March 30th. More to come, but this is the topic, is cannabis zoning is actually the topic. So we look forward to hear from the larger public. It would be great to be able to have some sort of presentation with some data points. Distances is a data point, some maps, you know, etc. Like whatever we decide. So there is an opportunity to get, I think, real engagement and feedback from the community. So I think the timing is very much appreciated. So that's sort of my first thought. My second thought, to add to what's been said, so I'm not repeating what others have said, and you know, I don't want to be redundant. I'll try not to be. I'd like to also, if somebody on staff can check in with the town has passed exactly the same thing. So after we do the work, it would be silly if the town and the village are like very close to each other on the borders, so that the two dispensaries are sort of close to each other, just by a North State Road and I don't know, somewhere nearby for the village. The odds are low that that would happen. But it would be silly if we did that as an oversight. I think somebody should just
Yeah.
check in with the
I
town and
did
what they're
check in
doing.
with Valerie, and she said that they had been thinking about maybe North State Road, but they hadn't come to any.
Well, that's really their only
conclusion.
commercial strip, frankly. So they're going for the commercial, which is what we just discussed. So that makes sense. There's a couple of other sort of industrial little parks. They're a little more hidden. They're not exactly commercial strips. We discussed the Arcadian, plenty of parking. You know, there's a landlord, so there's maintenance of things, and there's already lights, and it's a place that most people in the village can reach. You know, relatively easily, you know, because it's there's a reason we passed it. We want it. So to Omar's first point, we're not hiding this. This is something that we think makes a lot of sense in the dispensary, not the lounge. And now let's figure out best path forward. So, you know, lighting and all that. I'm thinking Arcadian, we discussed it, but any of the arteries is fine. I would go a little bit larger on the numbers. 250 is a little bit minimalistic for me. I would start looking at minimally 500, and I think that was an example. Oftentimes it's 1,000. The churches alone, or houses of worship, you know, in our village, I mean, that's already not going to leave a lot of spots left, to be honest. We have a lot of churches, we have schools, we have like all sorts of stuff, the parks, the training center, whatever else was said. So I think those are going to be very enlightening. What I thought was interesting that I didn't think about, so I appreciate, Jaime, that it's it, and Stuart was involved in this, was interesting, is that because this is sort of new, and new to us, but new to the state, new to everything, we have to make a decision about which body in our government approaches this. The way I understood it, I'm going to get corrected if I'm wrong, if we want the planning or zoning, however other boards we want, we have to create legislation to create that vehicle and the parameters for them and the law for them to read off of. They work off the law, as Jaime said, but we have to legislate the law. So we have to be specific so that they can follow something. If we want to take this on, okay, we may not have to be as prescriptive. We might have a lot more conversations and discussions and more people at our meeting the night we decide on it, as I think Jaime mentioned, but there's a lot more flexibility. And I totally see the pros and cons, and I think we should be thinking about that. I don't actually have an opinion, a rare statement for me, but the truth is that you know, it's something that I hadn't thought about. This newness creates a scenario where we either have to legislate and let somebody else carry, but they will carry it to the letter of the law that we create, or we do it ourselves. But I do have a question here, Jaime and Stuart. Is it all or nothing? In other words, I'm making this up. Do we get to look at the signage has to come to the board, but the location and the site plans and all that goes to one of the other boards? Or is it like the whole thing or none of it? Or can we say the parking is decided by the board and gets approval from the board of trustees, but the site plans have to be approved in secret, or whatever it is. Sizes, signs, blah, 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 has to be done by one of the boards. Is that a flexibility as well? Or does that not work that way? It's one of the boards makes decisions, etc. I don't know if and that's an actual question during the work session. I'm not being theoretical.
It can be done. I would not recommend it, because you're then essentially asking an applicant, and I want to just keep one thing in mind. You cannot distinguish this applicant from other applicants in that regard. So, you can't basically say, well, because you're a dispensary, we're going to basically make you jump over 9,000 hurdles while everybody else only has to go over 6,000 hurdles. It's very clear that they can only be regulated as to time, place, and manner. If you wanted to say, well, we'll decide parking, but planning would decide site plan or things like that, could you do it? Yes. Does it become overly onerous? Most likely. So you probably would not want to do that. But could you? The answer is yes. Currently now, special permits are only granted by the board, but special permit in this case could be granted by the planning board, or you could turn this into a conditional use, or like Peekskill, not require any, make it simply an as of right, in which case it would not require a conditional use permit, but might well require site plan resolution.
Okay, and that's what I was getting to, because it just, it didn't click till tonight that because it's so new, and that we have to also create some boundaries, not boundaries, some parameters, and decide on and who does all of that, and who selects and who decides. So this is very helpful, but we can decide, no matter who goes with this, is that we want it only in commercial roads. We can actually, from what I'm hearing, so it's a little bit more of a check-in, we can actually say, as somebody else did, only Route 6, we can say only 133 and South or North Highland. I mean, I'm making it up, but generally we could do that.
Yeah.
We could say exactly where, and it seems like we could say exactly where we don't want it, leaving a null set. We could also say nowhere in the historic district, none in residential district, leaving whatever else is left. It sounds like we can go either way. I'm getting clarity because of the presentation that I want to understand what I have to think about. So am I accurate in that as well?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as signage goes, yes, the signage in our village, uptown, downtown, east, west, north, south, I don't care where you're standing, is so inconsistent that it is sometimes unbearable. I don't actually know how to fix it. It's been discussed the entire time I've lived in this village, and it's not getting better, and it doesn't seem to get repaired in any meaningful way. Truthfully, I don't have a solution. My only way of living life is to know that even if I can't repair the past, even if we can and should, and we don't, certainly we can repair the future. So we do have an opportunity. It doesn't have to be just with dispensaries, but because this is new, to say, starting today, like something new, or starting with this, or whatever it is. And I don't think it's prejudicial. I simply think that you take an opportunity when you're creating something to say, effective with this. So I don't like signs that light up. I think they're disruptive to drivers on the street when things are so bright with these LED lights that they blink on and off 24 hours a day. It's disruptive. That's a personal opinion. I'm not an engineer, but so what do I know? It's just the way I feel about it. So we have an opportunity to say, we don't want signs that light up, or we only want signs that light up, and we don't want signs. The truth is, I don't know where that expertise comes from anybody in this gallery, including engineers and all of that. And I think there's a real issue between what is signage and what is advertising. So signs go up and a lot of work goes into it. And then all of a sudden things show up in the windows that are really sort of advertising. They go up, they go down, they're on cardboard, they're on this, they're on that. They're really signs, they're sort of ads that just never leave the windows or whatever. So I do think we're going to have to be a little careful of what people find offensive or not offensive. That's a tricky one, actually, in my opinion. So I think we're going to have to give it some thought, because what one person considers art, another person considers offensive. And so I think for me, that's going to be a little bit tricky. I assume, rightly or wrongly, that because of the expense of opening these things, these generally may look sometimes like mom and pop stores, but from the research some of us did, they're not. They are, I don't know if I'd say conglomerates, but you know, it's a big, big business. And a lot of the signs are part of like franchises. They're part of, so I think there's things for us to work on and use for comparison, but it's something to think about because ugliness we don't need more of, you know, so we want to be careful, we want to be respectful, and we have to understand that, you know, it's like there isn't really an expertise about taste, but there has to be some parameters about what we will allow and don't. So I'm very grateful for this presentation because it was very concise. It really showed me like things I had thought about. Hopefully before the March 30th meeting and before the next steps, which I'll ask about in a minute, people will look at this presentation. We should publicize it because I mean, I think there's a lot of clarity here. I also think that we have every right to say we don't want more than 3 of them. We don't want more than 6 of them. We don't, I mean, we have a lot of say, it seems like, to say, not only like we don't want them 1,000 feet within each other. We can actually say we're maximizing it at 3, we're maximizing it at whatever. So I envision there'll be lots of discussion between, you know, in that number. I recall most of our conversations were really about a small number, usually really in the single digit. But who knows? People may have different opinions, and some people may say, I just want 1. It's a small village, 1, and let's decide the opportunities of where that 1 may be. So I just wanted to bring that to the foreground because we haven't discussed this in a while. And for people that see this, my only remaining question, I'm sure there are many, but my only remaining is, we saw the presentation. What is the next steps here?
Mayor Jaime, before you answer that question,
Sure.
Mayor, just to kind of piggyback in some of the stuff that you brought up, and I want to kind of ask the board as well with the next steps within ourselves, obviously. So regarding to signage, in our previous job, when I did a lot of their high-end retail, and if you go to any mall, it doesn't matter which mall, they have signage regulations. And when we used to design a store, we needed to follow those regulations to the teeth, because if not, the signage was ripping down and they get fines and they get all this stuff. One of the interesting parts on a lot of the malls that they had that we worked on it is they had a setback from the storefront to where you were allowed to display any advertising. So you cannot put any advertising within the storefront itself. You needed to be, I want to say, 8 feet back from the storefront. So if we're going to be talking about regulations, I think that's the kind of stuff that we should be regulating. Some malls, they didn't allow you to have neon. There's no more neon lights, but no neon.
Same idea,
signage.
LED.
LEDs,
lights.
backlights. They just have this glow kind of stuff. So we can do all that stuff. I think the other question that I think I don't remember who brought this up. I think you may have brought this up as well to the town. We do have to meet with the town board at some point, because there's not just implementation of this, but there's also an implementation of taxation of this. So I think at some point we need to sit down with the board, with the town board, and figure out what the taxations are going to be as well. Because that is going to affect whatever sales taxes we're going to be getting out of any of the businesses, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them is going to look like as well. So again, I'm just putting that out there. We need to have that discussion with them.
Well, yeah, I don't know who we is, because for me, it could be.
The board, the 2 boards.
Well, it doesn't have to be Manny. We can have somebody who represents us, but there's a formula for the taxation. So the question is, beyond that formula, what conversation we want to have, because there's actually a formula that was legislated by the state. Any other discussion, like any other discussion, this board just has to say, who do we want to talk to, and do we want our attorneys talking? Do we want Dale talking? Do we want the village, whatever, or do we want to do it ourselves? So point well made and taken. I'm a little bit in a quandary. I think this is a good presentation. I think most of the questions, I think we covered a lot of space, and I'm thinking for the next steps, just pragmatically. I guess I had one more question, which I forgot to ask. Has anybody applied for anything yet?
Nobody they can't apply because there's no law open
Okay,
allowing them to do that yet. But I've received a phone call from a dispensary operator in Massachusetts who was asking about how how are things over here? Was it going to
Okay.
be available? This was prior to the decision to not opt out. And so I didn't really have any feedback to give them at that point, but they had expressed interest in Ossining.
Okay.
I met with the others.
All right, so look, that's one call in a few months. So the calls will start coming in as soon as the doors open. As I said, and as Dana had said, and we've said in the past, this is not you put $10,000 down, you pay rent, and you open a business deal. This is highly regulated, very expensive. And with that comes a level of knowledge that also the companies that do this, they do it in other places. They might be in other states. They're going to show us like what they currently do. So we'll have something to work with. So my question really is to the board is, do you want to wait for the March 30th to get constituent input? Because anybody seeing this presentation or questions, I think we covered some ground here. We said a couple of things that we want before we go down a path of what we've already said a lot of what we think. And we said it when we talked about the legislation. Do we want to now take the next step to say, we have enough information, we can publicize this presentation, our commentary that goes with it, whatever else we think, and wait for constituent feedback, commentary, points of view that will then inform us of what people are interested in, maybe even inform us with some new ideas we may not have thought about? Or is there some steps between now and the 30th, aside from creating some sort of a presentation less than probably 40-45 minutes, but more condensed, that includes some of this as FAQs or something, so that we have some structure to the meeting? I'd just like to sort of get a show of hands. Do we wait for constituent feedback to then go to the next step, or are there steps that we immediately want to
think a
take?
map
Besides,
should
in
be
addition,
done now.
besides the maps that we asked for.
Okay.
I think that the maps to me are indicative of presenting options to the community that are consumable. Otherwise, you're going to get, it's just a Rorschach test for how do you feel about marijuana, right? So,
Or it's how do you feel about the Arcadian? Like,
right, which is not going to be that helpful to us. But if we say like, hey, the cures from the least one that allows the most number of dispensaries, the one that allows the least, here's like 3 options, 4 options, whatever, and the corresponding maps, not to put all this work on you, Jaime, just saying again, for example, then people have something to chew on, and they can say, hey, like that makes sense, or hey, that doesn't make sense, or here's how I would twist it, or whatever.
right. So that's, I didn't mean to interrupt, Dana, but I don't know, maybe we've worked together so long that I'm now, I had a sense that it was about the maps, like, and that's what we just said. So we add that in, that gives us what was just stated. Let me not be redundant. We'll wait. So we'll wait for them. We're not waiting. I mean, it's not like we have 42 people trying to open up. They can't, even if they wanted to. And the state just sort of rolled out its own commission or whatever they're called. I actually don't know what they're called. The group that makes a lot of decisions about this. There's a formal name, just like there is about liquor. And
Yeah, the pot commission.
the pot commission, somebody at one of these meetings has to say that. Let
No,
it be you, Bob.
Why not? I think before we go out to the constituents, I think we need to have our proverbial guns loaded with the maps. Any possible questions that we think we might get hit with, so we look prepared, and that we've done our homework. And possible locations, maybe 2, maybe 3, a maximum of whatever, and I think we should come to that prepared, because I agree with Omar. We're going to get inundated if we don't look like we're prepared.
Okay. So I think Omar's point of view is from the least to the most, given distances. I would not do 250. I would do at least 500. That'll give you, I think we all agree on that. We'll be much more prepared. We have the Prezi. We could do FAQs from what we discussed. I need to just step away for 2 minutes. Do we have enough to move on to next topic?
Yes,
all right.
I think I do. I defer to Karen and Stuart if there are any other extra questions beyond that.
Okay, thank you, Jaime and Stuart, for the presentation. I know it was a lot of hard work that went into it, so it's good that we're getting this early preview of what the possibilities are. Our next presentation is going to be, I actually going to have our Director of Public Works, Paul Fraioli. He's here, is going to join us to talk about, you know, as you all know, we've been doing work to assess the requirements for the remediation of asbestos and mold at 200 Main Street. We have put that job out to bid, and we do have a recommendation for the bid award. And with that, I will let Paul take you through the details of that.
Good evening, board. So I think we may have discussed some of these things in prior meetings, so excuse me if I repeat myself. But with regard to 200 Main Street Bank with the Clock and the remediation project that we're undertaking right now, that is project DPW 2104 in our records. It's labeled 21 because we actually started the design and remediation design in the calendar year 21. And actually, when we initially started to discuss this, we did intend to finish in 21, but the logistics of the Main Street Improvement Grant, which I think I'll turn it over to Maddie in a little bit to elaborate on, took us out past 21 and into 22. So just for a little recap, on February 1st, Clerk Donnelly opened 2 sealed bids that were submitted for that contract number. Both of those bidders that submitted sealed bids did attend the walkthrough, which took place on January 19th. There was approximately 12 attendees in that walkthrough, which included 8 independent and different contract remediation contractors. So there was a lot of interest in the walkthrough. There was still very expected bid numbers submitted. They both looked reasonable. Both of the bidders have had experience with the consultant that we've used for the remediation specifications on this job, and vice versa. And just yesterday, we received the recommendation of award for the contractor that we're going to bring forth tonight. And we also received the bid bond for that contractor that was submitted to the clerk today. I spoke with counsel earlier. I'm going to do a cursory review of the document that was submitted and all the front end requirements and send it to Corporation Counsel as well, where we can have all that finalized before the legislative meeting next week, where we'll look for a resolution to award. The 2 bids, unfortunately I didn't bring the totals home with me, so I don't know if any of my counterparts have that on the call, but the total project cost was budgeted for roughly $500,000 in the capital project, and the low bidder came in at approximately $297,000 for the remediation work. So if you combine that with the consulting services that we have for the remediation specifications and for the services during the remediation, where we're required to monitor and test, all part of a remediation of this type, I think we'll still fall well within the budget for this project. At this point, I think it's appropriate to turn it over to Maddie briefly so she can explain the breakdown of the grant, how much we're expected to contribute and how much we're receiving from the state through the Main Street Improvement Grant.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Good evening, board. So yes, very exciting news. We have been hard at work at this for quite a while. As Paul alluded to, the New York Main Street grant does not exactly fit our situation perfectly. As we've discussed with the board before, typically this is not something that's used for municipally owned properties. And the only reason that we are allowed to take advantage of this program is because we plan to put the property back on the tax rolls once it's remediated. So we're sort of a carve out example of how this money can be used. But also, as Paul mentioned, we did get the 2 sealed bids and we are comfortably under budget. So I'm going to knock wood as I say that. So the 2 different phases of the project, the environmental consultant who we've been working with since the beginning, we did an RFP for that process. And we've been working with Quest, and Quest has done an outstanding job. They made it really easy on the bidders for the actual remediation by doing a lot of really advanced photography and scanning of the interior of the building, so that even if folks couldn't make the on-site visit, which as Paul mentioned, both of these bidders actually did, that they would have a really good idea of what exactly they were contending with, as well as the dimensions of some of the pieces of the building that need to be remediated. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think overall this is, probably the best outcome we could have hoped for, based on Quest's assessment. They're the ones who also helped us complete the bid packet. They believe that once the contractor is mobilized, they're going to be able to finish the work in between 12 to 16 weeks. And we do have a deadline of September 30th, which is our extension from HCR in the New York Main Street program. So that sign out there that says December 2021, a little stale, but we'll get there. So hopefully by summer, we'll be able to have I don't know if it'll be ribbon cutting or exactly how we're going to celebrate, but the remediation will be complete and we'll be able to move on to the next phase.
Thanks, Maddie. So before we open it up for questions, I just wanted to add that once we do make the award, we'll have a kickoff meeting out there. There will be a strategy session, including where we're going to place dumpsters. We're not going to have any exposure to the public of the material that we're remediating. These are licensed contractors and professionals in that field. And same thing for the consultant who's going to monitor this work for us. There is going to be some inconvenience during the couple of months of remediation, including some restricted parking around the building's perimeter. But that's something that we'll have at a kickoff meeting where I will certainly invite the police department and any other relative party for this work.
Okay. Anybody with specific comments or questions?
I have a question. I know that all of this work is interior, but since that building isn't in the historic district, is there a point at which the HPC would be brought in for any reason? Like I guess only for exterior work, right?
HPC is exterior only.
Okay.
And also just to, I'm sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Go ahead, Maddie.
I was just going to explain also, one of the things that actually, held us up a little bit in 2021 was that HCR requires a pretty intensive environmental review to be undertaken before we can even go on to the first step of the project, before we're even able to go to contract, actually. So there's a lot of information in there about, particularly like the Department of State and a couple other folks who have to, or who had to, I should say, give their approval to, what was going on. And again, there's some SHPO rulings that the contractor is going to have to abide by. But yes, since it's all interior work, that's already sort of been vetted with New York State, and they're satisfied with the remediation plan as presented.
I was going to mention the SHPO, so we're on the same page. Thanks for that. Maybe it's appropriate. Manager DeTore thinks it's appropriate to talk about the step 2 that we looked to undertake in connection with our DRI efforts. So everybody has a full picture of what we're looking to accomplish with this.
So do you want to, so the first stage is the remediation. Second stage, we would be eligible for grants for
I know.
bid ups of that property based on a partner that or a private sector developer, owner, business owner who wanted to develop that property. And we are looking at RFP, we have put that building up. There has been an RFP for in the past, and we'll be asking the board to evaluate whether they want to do that going forward to identify a partner. And then phase 2 would be fitting up the building for say it was a restaurant, the grant can pay for that, and then it becomes an incentive for the business owner to be able to offset some cost, which helps them with the business, helps us get something in there after being vacant for so long, and then ultimately would be the type of business that will help the neighboring businesses as well.
Some other points of interest are that when we ran temporary electric into the building some time ago, because the electric panel inside was corroded and not functioning, we now have an exterior metered electrical source, which is a great thing to have when you're doing the remediation for some of the material that some of the equipment they're going to use. We also always maintain the water service to that building. We never cut that out at the main. So we're going to reactivate the water service, which is something else they're going to need during the remediation process. So we are ready for them. And hopefully everything goes smoothly. And like Maddie mentioned earlier, a couple of months, we should have the place remediated once the work commences. And I think that's going to be a great thing, particularly to get that work done in advance of the summer where the downtown starts to really get busy.
And Paul, the parking spots that are likely going to be used are the ones that are directly adjacent to the building, right? So the 30-minute spots on the west side of Main, am I right?
Correct. We're looking
Okay.
to accommodate not just the potential, we're going to have dumpsters there. They're going to be, it may be live loads. We have to see what the contractor says when we eventually get the awarded contractor out there. But they're going to be one on either side. There's going to be a contaminated one up on the property itself that's going to be removed and covered. I'm sorry, covered and removed. The other one, which will be construction debris with non-contaminated material, will be likely the one that's going to be down in the 30-minute spots. We also want to maintain some regular spots for the actual workers, because most of this work, they're going to be in respirators and Tyveks, and would you really want to inconvenience a worker that's going to be coming and going from the building to have to walk through the village to get to and from their vehicles where they might need to go for equipment and such.
What did you say the timing was again?
Once they mobilize, they expect to be done within 12 to 16 weeks.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna ask the question, just like we've done with other projects where we've had room for, they only saw what they saw. And if they uncover something that requires more or it's a change order, I'm presuming that we are expecting that.
I was having a hard time hearing you. What I think Trustee Fritchie was asking is, what's the potential for unknowns to upset the budget? Correct?
Yes.
Okay, so Maddie referenced it earlier, the very detailed models that they made of the building and the dimensions and what have you. There's also the specification of what we're requiring them to remove, because it's going to be classified as asbestos containing material, since there was a partial demo started in a building. Basically, the entire area gets classified as asbestos containing material. So I don't know who's been in there, how recently, and what you've seen, but essentially everything that you see inside that, in the interior of the building, in the basement, upstairs, and on the main floor, anything that's really not a masonry component or that structural steel is going to be removed. All the plasters coming down, all the piping, the copper piping, the HVAC, the ductwork, everything's getting pulled out and removed from the building, because it's going to be considered contaminated material. And at that point, you're going to be left basically with a
Shell.
an empty shell
Right.
that's considered remediated. But we're going to turn it right over into the next phase, because we have temporary electric where we could put some semblance of heat and or air conditioning as needed to prevent humidity buildup. But the building is watertight, so that because we fixed the roofs a few years ago. But we do need to have some electric and the ability to do partial lighting in there, and make, depending on how long the second phase takes, maybe some heat and maybe some ventilation. But we have the electric supply to do that. And I think based on the specification of the material that we're going to remove in the contract documents, I think there's a very small chance of anything getting unearthed there that we don't know about.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Just want to say thank you, Paul, Maddie, and everybody else that's actually had worked on this project. Is I think I'm excited to see something happening in there. So I'm looking forward September 1st to maybe before that to actually go back into the space. I haven't been there in many years. So we're looking forward to see how it looks after the remediation is completed.
I'm excited too. It's been a long time coming. And the thought of that building having a functional purpose and contributing to the tax rolls and being brought into the proper architectural member of our community and our business community and our I think it's just going to be a remarkable thing. So
Make a really nice dispensary, right, Trustee White?
well, I wasn't going to say that, Paul, but actually it happens to be 1 inch from a church, so probably not. Probably not. And the parking, not so good. So I don't think a dispensary would, I mean,
Not yet.
beautiful. Not yet.
Not yet, anyway.
We'll see. But
Parking is, being done in concert with the Route 9 corridor work. Parking could be greatly improved if we keep moving along in that direction.
Thank you, Paul Fraioli. We can, are we going to, I don't know if we want to have that conversation on top of the enthusiasm for 200 Main Street right now.
What's wrong with that? It's like it's all interrelated. It's fine.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah, no, it's good. Like, I don't know, 4 or 5 decades the building has been sitting there. It's right at the entrance to the village. Honestly, if it had parking right there in some way, without, in a nice way, without being ugly, it probably would have been sold years ago. So, it's a challenge, but there we are. We're taking it on. Past boards couldn't. Economies were different. Doesn't matter. It's every day's a new day. So very excited about it. Just remember, you do have a nice sign there explaining that it's a project of some sort. I'm very big on putting signs in front of things that are being worked on, especially by the village, so that people who walk by, people who drive by understand that there's something happening that's good for the future, that it's not a tear down, it's not a whatever, but in fact, it's an enhancement to the village, on behalf of the village. So I'm very pro signage and updating signage as needed so that it doesn't get stale in and of itself. So all good. I think we're ready for the next item.
I just have one more question. Paul, I know you said about parking and the guys working there parking and dumpsters and it impacting the Main Street businesses. Just a thought. This is a 7 to 3:30 job, I'm presuming. Is this a prevailing wage, John?
Yes.
Prevailing wage. So just an idea. I'm going to float it out there, but maybe the parking lot on Ellis Place with the church, the red church, maybe if they would entertain you allowing guys to park there. I don't know. It's right there, it's right across the street. I'm just looking at what's going to happen on Main Street because it's not going to be 1 or 2 cars. it's gonna be trucks. I mean, we know. So, it's gonna be a logistical nightmare, but if we can ease that and have just like the worker bees maybe park, or see if we can talk to them, see if they would even entertain it during the day, you know, from certain hours, and then there will be nobody in that lot. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah, the workers parking was really a collateral benefit of giving them that swath of 30-minute spots. It's really the dumpsters that have to be adjacent to the site or on the site itself. That's a requirement. So because of that, we talked about maybe some worker spots too. But if they have a lot, I don't know how many workers they're going to have there. We still have to go over that with the contractor. If they say there's going to be 15, workers on the site every day and they're all going to drive separately, obviously that's not going to work, and we're going to have to work out something with them. But to be determined.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Manager, we're going back to the agenda.
We are. Thank you so much. It is very exciting, and staff, Annie and Paul in particular, have been working really hard on this. So we're really happy to see things moving along. Thank you.
Oh, you're on mute. We have such an exciting agenda here tonight. Got excited there for a minute.
What's happening there? Maybe I hit something by accident. We are also working on becoming the greenest village in the nation. And this is something that we've put a lot of effort to. It is definitely something that the mayor and the board have championed. And Maddie Zahat has done a phenomenal job taking advantage of many different opportunities over the past few years to put us well on the track of being a sustainable and green community. So she has a presentation right now to bring everybody up to speed with what's been done so far and what we're looking forward to be doing in the future. Again, Maddie's been spearheading this, but this is really work of the staff who's represented here, our village engineer, our planner, Jamie Hoffman, who does enormous amounts of communication about the work that we do, as well as other staff who's not here with us tonight, and of course Stuart as well. So with that, I would like to turn that over to Maddie.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Hello again, everyone. I am going to share my screen. I need to make sure I do it with the sound. So.
Yeah, I forgot that your screenshot behind you is actually 200 Main.
It is, with a mask on.
That's right.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So as Manager Tori mentioned, we are setting our sights very, very high. The mayor has tasked us with becoming the greenest village in the country. So I'm very proud to say that we're well on our way. And in fact, we've been well on our way for a little while now. So I'm not going to go through this exhaustive list, but the Village of Ossining has been a leader, both locally, statewide, and also nationally in adopting a lot of sustainable practices, being early adopters of a lot of new technologies, all in the pursuit of reducing our carbon footprint. So you can see we started an environmental advisory council 20 years ago, as a matter of fact, founding member of NWEAC. So I'm not sure if any of the board members, I'm thinking Deputy Mayor Casada, you're going to recall this, that originally the village was a member of something called NWEAC, which was the Northern Westchester Energy Action Coalition. There was also a counterpart in the Southern Westchester called SWEAC, and they eventually disbanded and joined together to form Sustainable Westchester. The village was also one of the first communities in the state to take the Climate Smart Communities Pledge back in 2009, formed Green Ossining back in 2010, which is a sort of town village committee headed by Susie Ross, who is a formidable advocate for our environment, as well as the many members of Green Ossining who share that responsibility. Community choice aggregation is huge. This is something that really got its footing well in New York. Basically, large populations of people banding together can afford all renewable energy at a cheaper cost. Yost, just the buying in bulk power of that. And that's something the village has been doing since 2015, as well as the town of Ossining. We also participated in Energize and Solarize programs through Sustainable Westchester, an LED streetlight conversion, thanks to village engineer Paul Fraioli. So all of our decoratives, as well as all of our streetlights, have been converted over to LED, which is saving us major money on our New York Power Authority bill monthly. The water department introduced a toilet replacement program. So that was encouraging folks in the community to use a low flow toilet, I believe is what it's called. We had a voucher. We were working with a local business in order to make sure that as many folks as possible had the opportunity to save water in their own homes. Gas-powered leaf blower legislation, also something that the village has enacted in the past couple of years. Greening our fleet, you can see at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen are 2 all-electric Nissan Leafs, Sparky and Volt. And we did a naming contest for those guys. Those are code enforcement officer vehicles. And again, they're 100% electric, so they get plugged in every night. They only get used locally or around town. And they've been working out great. Everybody loves them. They argue about who gets to drive it that day. So we definitely are looking to do more of those in the future. We modernized our wetlands legislation 2 years ago. And our water department is very on top of water leak detection programs, software, and different initiatives, different grants that we can find for that to make sure that our water system is watertight. So you can see a couple of these other flyers here. This one, again, is when the streetlights were converted over to LED a couple of years ago. This water sense was the low flow toilet, and climate smart communities is something I'm going to be talking about in a couple minutes further in the presentation. So that's where we've been, where we went. So 2021 was a big year for us in terms of taking strides to become the greenest village in the country. So you can see right outside 200 Main Street, there we are again. That is a banner for the Energy Smart Homes program, which is something that the village, the town, and the Village of Briarcliff Manor participated in through Sustainable Westchester. It was actually a grant opportunity that we received, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. You can also see on the right-hand side, this is our 511 New York rideshare kiosk, which we got to borrow for Car Free Day this year. And we definitely want to have back next year because it was very cool. And you can see down there at the COVID Memorial, that was one of many trees that we planted this year, but I'm calling that one number 81. That was the scarlet oak that we planted for Arbor Day in 2021. So let's start with getting the green. We got some money to do a lot of this stuff. The first one is a little bit different. The Department of Environmental Conservation, or the DEC, actually awarded $125,000 to a consultant who's going to be preparing work on behalf of Ossining. So it's a $125,000 grant. It was only available to communities that had participated in the Climate Adaptive Design Studio through Cornell a couple of years ago. I believe that was in 2019. And so we were one of the only communities eligible, and we got it. So we have been paired up with this consultant who we are still in the very, very, very early stages of determining what might be possible along the shoreline of the Hudson, down at Lewis Engle Park and Gordine Park. And so that's something you'll be hearing quite a bit about in the coming weeks and months. Clean energy communities is something that has gotten us a lot of grant funding. I'm going to go quickly here to our report card, and this is as of a couple days ago. We actually hired an intern over this past summer who helped us get caught up on a lot of past actions that the village had worked on. So remember on the first slide, I was telling you about a bunch of these cool, innovative things that we had done. We were ahead of the curve, but we didn't take any of the credit for it. This program has been in existence for a couple of years. Clean energy communities actually gets you grant money, whereas climate smart communities, which I'll talk about later, is a little bit different. But you can see between clean fleets, community choice aggregation, LED streetlights, we had a lot of things in the past that we were able to get points for. And then community campaigns and energy code enforcement training, I'll talk about a little in a second. But you can see we got a ZEV, which is EV charging station upgrade at the operations center. So we've had one of those for about 7 or 8 years that we were able to get money to upgrade it to now a phase 2. We got a $5,000 grant for completing a community campaign through Energy Smart Homes. And I'm not sure if anybody on the board got a chance to do this. I did, and I was very successful, not that that should surprise you, in the Grid Rewards program. So basically it's an app that you can download and it connects to your Con Ed account. And basically on the very hottest days of the summer, it'll tell you to raise your thermostat by a couple of degrees during 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. say. It'll also give you some tips. Don't, run your dishwasher, don't do laundry, keep lights off, just things that we all know that we're not supposed to do, during a power surge. But to try to prevent the use of peaker plants, which are these plants that produce really unclean energy. And so by doing that, because it's hooked into your Con Ed account, you actually are eligible for a rebate at the end of the summer season. So I got a pretty big check. Susie Ross was very impressed by me. Also, we got another $5,000 for completing 4 high impact actions. And then very shortly on the heels of that came a $10,000 one for amassing 3,000 points. So we have someone very special to thank for that. Joe Augustinelli and his staff participated in the Energy Code Enforcement training. I believe that was in October of last year. And that is what set us over the top for both of those grants. And so we'll talk a little bit in a moment about what we're going to do with that $10,000, which is very exciting, as well as this $5,000. And then finally, Sparky, we got a $5,000 rebate for him from NYSERDA. We are working on the one for Bolt in 2022. Okay. So make it grow. As you know, we've talked a lot about trees this year. In 2021, we were named a Tree City by the Arbor Day Foundation for the first time. So you apply at the very end of the year for that year. So we found out in, I think, January or February of 2021 that we'd been named in 2020. So that was very exciting. We joined our friends in the town who I believe celebrated their 23rd anniversary of being named a Tree City. So this was our first Arbor Day together as Tree Cities. And like I mentioned, we planted number 81, a scarlet oak, which is a native species tree at Nelson Sitting Park. So you can see this picture of our happy crew up here. Again, that's at the COVID memorial. These are our fantastic parks guys who learned an awful lot about trees with me and Jamie this year. Because we planted 80 native species trees with an urban forestry grant from the DEC. I've said this before and I'll say it again. We were one of the DEC's favorite projects. They tell us all the time that we were a shining star in this regard. And that has nothing to do with me. That has to do with the Parks Department, and that has to do with Jamie Hoffman. The Parks Department was incredibly enthusiastic about this project. As you can see from the picture here, we had a couple of green ocening volunteers join us over the course of the couple days of planting. This gentleman in the green shirt on the ground here is George Profis. He is the regional forester for our region of the DEC. And he loved this project so very much. And the guys loved working with him. He had so much advice to offer. Anybody who was there that day, including Karen, Jamie, a couple other folks could tell you, the energy was fantastic. And we really got something great accomplished. And again, they provided hands-on training. So we also had Donna Sharrett from the Cornell Cooperative Extension. We had our consultants from Save a Tree who worked on the planting plan, which you can see below right here. And as I mentioned, DEC and green ocening. So a couple more photos. That's all the trees were being delivered. That's the planting plan for Nelson Sitting Park. It's some of our Parks Department, Miguel, and Brian. Some of our volunteers helping the Parks Department. And then finally, spread the word. We did a really good job this year of not only doing the work and documenting the work so we could get money to do more work, but also letting everybody know what we were doing in case they want to participate, and also to educate them about what we plan to do in the future and what they can do in their own homes and families to sort of help us further to improve the environment and reach our sustainability goals. So again, shout out to Jamie. Social media campaigns. We did a big one for the Arbor Day tree planting, the video of which is posted on YouTube. The bilingual tree planting demo is something that the DEC really liked. And that's something that we could not have done without the help of our volunteer friend, Donna Sharrett from the Cornell Cooperative Extension, as well as our parks foreman, Miguel Mara. He and his staff demonstrated everything they learned from Mr. Profis in terms of how deep you needed to dig the hole and how wide and how to make sure a tree was healthy before you planted it and freeing the roots. And he was able to basically do a bilingual demonstration with Donna. So anything that she said in English, he repeated in Spanish. So we have that available now in perpetuity also on our YouTube. Jamie also did a great job this year with the leaf blower legislation, getting the word out. We're going to start working on that again very soon for 2022 because we had a couple ideas that probably would have been better if we had gotten started a little bit sooner. So that's another project we're going to be working on the next couple of weeks. Car Free Day with 511 New York Rideshare. They're a great partner of ours, and they've done Car Free Day in Ossining for the past couple of years. You can see they're right in the middle of the screen. Modu Cham, he is awesome. And basically their goal is to find ways for us to have less dependence on single passenger automobiles. And so something that they're particularly good at is getting people to carpool. So basically they offer incentives to private companies as well as government organizations for organizing carpools for employees coming to work. And there's even financial incentives involved for those employees. So that's something that we're looking to explore in the year ahead. We also introduced the Recycle Right mobile application, which I'll be talking about a little bit on the next slide. But basically, this is a way to get your sanitation calendar online. It's been phenomenal so far. Happy to answer any questions about it. But that's been another thing that Jamie's done an exceptional job of getting the word out about. We've also added a green corner to our website. So now we have a page for all of these sustainability initiatives. This will be on there. And one of those $5,000 I told you about, we did a community survey for how to spend that money. And ultimately we came up with a couple different locations and types of bike racks to try to incentivize people to use their bikes to traverse our community. So again, just to zoom some of these cool pictures. Okay, so that was where we went. And now where are we going? So as I mentioned, the Recollect app, we kicked off in December of 2021. Next year, we're going paperless. You don't have to get scared. You can still get a paper one if you really need one. But the village is going to be saving the expense of printing those calendars en masse for the year 2023. Certainly, again, if you don't feel comfortable using the website or the very user-friendly app and those notifications, we can certainly print a calendar and mail it to you. But we've already started to see some of the statistics in the 1 month that we've been online, and it's looking good. People are using it. People are really enjoying it. Again, happy to answer questions. You can call the manager's office or DPW. The staff in Paul's office have been exceptional in getting this put together. We couldn't have done it without them. The Climate Smart Communities Task Force, that's a new project that we're going to be undertaking with the town of Ossining. And Green Ossining and some folks from our EAC and Planning Board. And Jaime Martinez is going to be my staff partner along with Mayor Levin on the Climate Smart Communities Task Force. So similar to Clean Energy Communities, we are going to be documenting a lot of past actions, many of which were spearheaded by Green Ossining on behalf of the town and village, which is why we're doing it together. And again, this is mainly bragging rights. You're able to, have access to different pools of grant money as a result of becoming a climate smart community, but there's no one for one in the same way that it is with the clean energy community, which is why we decided to start there. Again, Tree City, we just found out at the beginning of this week that we were named a Tree City for 2021. So that's great news. Again, that is largely because of the 80 trees that we were able to plant with the DEC grant. So we're going to have to step up our game even further this year. So we're already exploring how to do that. And we are eligible, since we now have 1 year under our belt, to apply for the Growth Award with Tree City. So that's something that, again, Mr. Profis is encouraging us to do. And that's going to just be another feather in our green cap here. The Climate Action Planning Institute, CAPI, is something that the village signed the village agreed to participate in back in 2019, and due to COVID, we have not been able to move along with it, but the board may recall last week, you authorized the mayor to sign an MOU, so hopefully that'll be getting started next month. And basically, Westchester County got a sizable grant to put together a consortium of communities, the town and village being 2 of them, who are going to leave the process with a greenhouse gas inventory, as well as a climate action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So the only contribution from the village is staff and volunteer time. So again, we're going to be moving forward with that. Jaime is my partner, and we're going to enlist some of our volunteer board members and make it happen. A project that the board is familiar with, the Indian Brook Water Treatment Plant, is hopefully going to get underway within this year. And the green roof on the plant is a component of that. We got, I believe it's $160,000 grant from the Green Innovations Grant Program, which is part of EFC. So we're looking forward to learning a little bit more about how green roofs work. And then finally, something that's really exciting is green zones. This is something that Bill Garrison is actually really into, and I'm very excited to work with him and his team on. Bill got a certification from AGZA, which is the American Green Zone Alliance. And basically, a green zone is an area in a community that no gas-powered equipment is used, right? So only battery powered or manual. And Bill went to the training. He is now a sustainable land care certified person through AGZA. And so he has done a lot of research. They already have an electric mower and a few electric weed whackers. Or no, I'm sorry, they have the battery operated blowers, but in the capital project schedule for this year, they have money for an electric mower and some electric weed whackers. So Bill would like, and this is obviously something we'll be coming back to the board about shortly, to make Arthur Jones, Wishney, Snowden, and eventually Gordine Park, once we take over management, into green zones, which again means it's going to be all manual equipment, no gas powered. And that's something that, he and I have sort of gone back and forth on a couple of ideas. But one of the best ideas is Bill wants to design a t-shirt and have all the parks guys wear t-shirts that say Ossining is going green, and then sort of, be able to explain what the program is if somebody asks. So that's something that we're really looking forward to. You can see a little bit about AGZA here. Again, it's not only about the environment, it's also about our employees. So our employees who are using this equipment, it's not just emissions into our atmosphere, it's emissions into our bodies. So this is, also a staff initiative as well. So remember I told you about that other $5,000? Well, we're making a rain garden. Very exciting. We have decided to move forward with Wishney Park. So right at the very base of Orchard on the Pleasantville Road side of the park, there's a little, I'm not sure exactly what it is. I think it's like a maintenance or water building of some sort. But there is room there for a rain garden. We spoke with, again, Donna Sharrett, our resident planting expert, who thinks it's an exceptional place for a rain garden. Basically, what a rain garden is a place that can sort of be stormwater retention. So keeping water off the road, keeping it from flooding. You put in particular plants that are very thirsty and want to sort of contain the water on a certain site. So you can see here where we're talking about putting it. Again, Pleasantville Road is here. Orchard is here. This is Chilmark. And if you've driven past it, it's a pretty soggy area over here. Another benefit to doing this is its location. Because it's so visible, we want it to be a demonstration rain garden. So we're looking to do some signage so that members of the community understand how they can do it on their own property, because it's relatively inexpensive, it's not terribly invasive, and it's scalable. So it's something that you can do no matter what size property you're dealing with, and it'll help you take some of that water off your property if you're prone to flooding. But also more to the green zone point, this will be just that much less grass that they have to mow and maintain. Here's what a rain garden looks like. So you see there's some masonry involved, but it's something that we can definitely do in-house. And Donna recommended that we work with Cornell Cooperative Extension because they are experts in this. So later this week, I have a call scheduled with them, and we are going to talk about how we can get this started. And then finally, there's a picture of Andy and our mayor and Karen and Paul and our senator, Elijah Reichlin-Melnick, at the water treatment plant. I'll go back here. We are also working on a grant that the village got for Drinking Water Source Protection Program, DWSP2, for Indian Brook. And again, this is at the very, very, very early stages. We haven't really gotten into anything engagement-wise yet, but keep your eyes peeled for that very shortly. Go back through this. All right, catch some rays. We participated back in 2020 in a community solar RFP through New York Power Authority. We identified 3 sites: the Ossining train station lots, the Op Center Highway building, which is the back building, and the roof of the community center. Unfortunately, the roof of the community center was not something that they felt had the capacity at this time. So we'll be looking at that in the future if we make some roof repairs. But there are 2 different community solar firms who have approached the village about doing an installation similar to the one at Maryknoll. That's a community solar project that people from the community can buy in and get less expensive, all green power. So 2 different sites, the Ossining train station lots. You see the one right off of Water Street, that's the Quimby Street lot, as well as the main lot on the far side of the tracks. And then, like I said, the Op Center Highway building. I also participated in the Mid-Hudson Regional Solar Mapping inaugural class with Clearwater and Scenic Hudson back in the fall. So I look forward to bringing that forth to the board to sort of explain what I've learned and where we might go from here. We also want to talk about the Unified Solar Permit, which is also sort of an extension of that conversation. And then what's probably the most exciting part is the Big Belly Solar Trash Compactors. So I'm just going to flip through a couple of these pictures till we get there. This is one of the solar maps. So it's basically a tool that was created by Scenic Hudson that shows you what properties within your municipality would be appropriate for solar. They've gone through the trouble of making all these GIS layers. So you see the yellow properties here are places where they think there's enough surface area that it would be appropriate. And then you can see some of like the feeder lines, and it's really cool to play with all the layers. So you really have an idea of what's feasible and what isn't. Here's our class. There's me, there's Victoria Caffarelli. We had folks from all over the region. And then finally, Big Belly solar trash compactors. So this is something that they use across the world. Nearby, they use them in White Plains, they use them in Manhattan and a bunch of places. But basically, it is a solar powered trash compactor that's often paired with a recycling or composting bin. But we got in touch with them, and Paul, Jamie, and I went to White Plains to visit with the deputy commissioner and the superintendent. They love these things. So we're trying to put together a proposal to the board of how we think we might like to use them. There's a very short video clip I want to play for you, but here was our field trip. And here's the video.
Big Belly is a more streetwise way to manage waste and recycling. It's a solar-powered smart waste unit in city centres, retail high streets, transit hubs, education, shopping malls, parks and other public spaces. When the public deposit rubbish in the waste or recycling units, a sensor measures capacity and a compactor presses it all down. This allows the unit to swallow up to 8 times more waste than a standard street bin before it fills up. The unit then sends an email notification to say how full it is and when it will be ready to be emptied. This real-time data is used in a clean management system to improve operational performance and manage costs. Big Belly is proven to reduce the number of collections by up to 80%. And collection costs by 75%. Big Belly is proven to cut CO2 emissions, produce huge fuel savings, and reduce the need for collection trucks. This has proven to create cleaner streets with less vermin, fewer pests, and more attractive public spaces, with a real visible commitment to sustainability. Big Belly is saving time, cutting costs, improving the environment, and building better communities using smart data and cloud-driven technologies everywhere, from New York to Nottingham, Tokyo to Aberdeen, Amsterdam to Dublin.
All right. So you can see why I'm so excited about those. And I think I've converted Paul Fraioli as well. I know Jamie is a convert. So finally, we'll wrap this up with Let's Roll. We're doing a lot with transportation, hoping for in this year. I mentioned the $10,000 Clean Energy Community Grant. So we had in the capital plan for 2022 a replacement fleet vehicle for the building department. It's a 2006 or 2007 Chevy Impala that has seen better days. So we had money in the capital plan to replace that vehicle, and we're able to put the $10,000 grant towards doing that. We already went through the process of OGS, which is Office of General Services. We got a bid and we put in a purchase order today. So the building department is going to be the proud owner of a plug-in hybrid RAV4 Prime, which has gotten really good reviews. So we're really excited, and we're getting it for a song because after the New York State discount that we get of 10%, we also are going to apply that $10,000 grant. And then additionally, we get a $7,500 rebate from the federal government for going with a plug-in hybrid. So we're getting a pretty inexpensive car. This is something that we've not really shared publicly yet, so I'm not going to say much. But the village had worked with Nelson Nygaard on the parking and mobility study, and we developed a great relationship with them. And I know we mostly talk about the parking part, but mobility was another really important part of the study. If we can get people out of their cars and onto bicycles or public transportation or even onto their feet, that certainly reduces traffic, not to mention all of the positive impacts it has on emissions. So Nelson Nygaard approached us and said, can we write a grant proposal for you? And they had a team assembled. You can see it along the bottom here. Eno Energy, Acton, Duct, Nelson Nygaard, and the Village of Ossining. They submitted an application on our behalf to the, what is it called? Clean Transportation New York program. It's DEC and NYSERDA, and we made the final round. So we are one of 6 communities who are eligible for a 1 in 3 shot at $7 million. So again, there are 6 communities, 3 will win $7 million. And again, this is, not something that we really had to participate much in, except say, yeah, do it here. So I'm just going to show you a very brief video about Project Mover. And basically being in this phase means that the consultants get another $100,000 to refine their proposal to see who gets to the final. So this is by far not a sure thing, which is why we're not going to say much, but I did want to quickly show you the video.
There's better mobility, job access. My name is Jennifer Jones, project lead for our Project Mover application, centered in the village of Ossining and scaled along the Hudson River. The village desires better mobility, job access, and reliable connections, and most importantly, the community wants to flatten its hilly terrain. Project Mover is led by our principal organization, EIT InnoEnergy, a global organization that delivers new ideas and solutions to decarbonize transportation. Our partners have extensive experience developing mobility solutions, including Acton, our e-bike solution provider, Duct, our micromobility charging station provider, Nelson Nygaard, our mobility program and system design consultant, and of course our anchor partner, the Village of Ossining. We will deploy both shared and subsidized lease-to-own e-bikes for personal use and power them with an interoperable e-bike charging station network that powers and docks all e-bikes. Paid community organizations will deliver bilingual education, marketing, and travel training in both English and Spanish. And finally, our electric micromobility incubator will extend the benefits to 4 additional participant communities. We want to unlock the freedom to move. We don't want to just grow and scale an e-bike system, but we want to achieve cultural acceptance, and we want to increase both access to opportunities and jobs in this micromobility industry. And we don't want to replicate it in the far off future, but we want our big ideas to incubate locally and scale now. We see Project Mover playing a role in communities across New York State and beyond very soon. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, I know the volume on that was super duper low. That is as loud as she goes, unfortunately. And then the last component is something that I've been talking about for 2 years now. And it's something that I think everybody on the team is really enthusiastic about, but we just haven't quite figured how to finance it yet. The Circuit is a company that is based out of Long Island that does all electric shuttles. So we kind of see this or a similar company or similar model as being sort of one of the better solutions for mobility, particularly in our downtown and connecting it to the train station. They got a lot of play during COVID because not only are they hiring locally to manage the fleet and actually do the driving, but unlike a taxi cab, you actually get your own row that's separated by plexiglass. So that was something that they really put forth as being a benefit to, safer and more private public transportation. So this is something that we've already, gotten a proposal from them. It was right before COVID, then, that was not going to be possible. So it's something that we're really committed to explore again in 2022. If anyone has ever used it in New Rochelle, this is a picture from New Rochelle. They've been doing it for a while. It's very, very successful there, and they're actually able to offer it for free. That's not necessarily the model that we would recommend, but you can do advertising to try to offset the cost of the municipality. There are a lot of different ways that we can fund it. We just haven't really put all the pieces together quite yet. But it would be pretty cool if we could offer something that's all electric. Apparently they do pretty well on hills and in the snow, although I would like to test drive that and make sure. So that is another component of Let's Roll. And then finally, our road diet. The road diet is certainly going to make getting around in Ossining greener, in that it's going to enhance walkability. And we are really excited to see where that project goes. It is currently in the hands of the New York State DOT, but after our last meeting with them, they said that they were pretty confident that we would be able to make this work. So Creighton Manning is working on making some of the amendments that were asked for, but we should have news on that relatively soon. So that's where we are, gang. To wrap up, here is the lovely Jamie demonstrating a big belly. Again, this is in White Plains, and you can see there's a foot pedal on it. So it's even particularly safe for COVID because you don't actually have to grab it with your hand. We have a lot of other pictures from that field trip. It was a lot of fun and we learned a lot. And on that note, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. I know I definitely went over time, but I appreciate it.
Hey. Thank you, Maddie, and everybody else involved in it. So first of all, let's do a time check. Yes, slightly over 10 minutes, the allotted time for presentations. It's 10:03 and we're more than halfway through the agenda. But here's what I would recommend on this. Lots to talk about, lots to think about. I suggest we process all this because these are all projects in play. I mean, any questions, like, this is a work session. It's the public is welcome to watch. We sort of should think of, I sort of said to myself, the last 5 slides, each could have been a separate presentation. I mean, I've sat through where, the garbage is 1 10-minute presentation. The lights is like 10-minute presentation on its own, just the kind of lights. There was so much there. Honestly, I asked you to put this together because I think sometimes we talk a lot about infrastructure, but we don't see the picture on a topic. Like parking's a topic, environment could be a topic, and that. So thanks for doing that, and for a ton of work, which started, in 2002 since we started documenting. But a lot's been done in the last couple of years, which is really, really great because it's become very focused. There is some truth to, you start planning and you start documenting and you work as a team and you get people involved, and a project becomes 2 and 2 becomes 4 and 4 becomes 8. So that isn't somebody's pet project and everybody bounces on that one project, but rather like an accordion, it just keeps growing and growing and making music. So, and I don't know why I'm using that analogy, but it came to mind because I thought it was just, I almost started crying at one point because as long as I've lived here, as long as I've lived here, we talked about electric mobility for people who are handicapped, people who need to get to work but don't have cars. How do you do it? It's too hilly. I think Catherine Borgia, when I first met her, talked about trolleys and the same idea. And I've seen this in other countries. I've seen it in very old cities. I've seen it in modern cities. So all of a sudden I'm seeing it. I mean, I saw this presentation, you had sent it, but it was sort of like, okay, today's the day, this could be actually happening. That's just one item. And then there's all the other stuff. And yes, I know the garbage cans we get turned on about, but honestly, garbage is a big part of village management. When it doesn't get right, everybody notices it. And we get lots of emails about too much garbage, not enough garbage cans. It goes on and on, the waterfront of this. So I understand why you focused on finding solutions and you didn't go to the other side of the world. You actually went to a municipality who's been using it in New Rochelle. I've never seen it, actually. I go to New Rochelle all the time because I work there. I mean, I work on the border of New Rochelle. I've never seen the electric, but hey, so I want us all to sort of digest. I'd love to send this to Green Ossining. Also, maybe they'll post on their website. I thought I saw Susie is on. I thought, let's get the word out for the presentation, because I'm sure not everybody watches our meeting. I'm 100% sure not everybody watches our meeting. Questions, comments we could bring back. I don't think tonight necessarily. If there are things on there that some of you didn't know is going on, I almost feel like I should apologize. A lot of work has been going on, and that's what good village management does. They just get things done. They don't talk about it, they do it, and this is a great example of it. All this stuff is great. I'm sort of speechless because when you see it all together, and I would put numbers next to everything instead of bullets so that people see how big some of these things are. So kudos to everybody. I mean, I'll open up to a gallery, but I just want to sort of move on the agenda, because aside from standing up and applauding Maddie and everybody, and Green Austining is, I mean, so many people involved in so many different projects, seeing it all together. And I love the new Rob. I didn't realize we were getting that one. That one I didn't know about. So that's sort of cool. And yes, I have an electric bike. And yes, it makes it up the hill. I mean, I live on a hill. And so it's going to be really great for some people who may not be able to have cars, but can get around for 9 months out of the year to all sorts of places. And I mean, all of this stuff is just everything the public who's interested in environment has been talking about for so long. And I feel like it's actually happening. Actually, with or without the DRI, this is a topic that's happening just because the village is working on it. So I thank everybody. Anybody want to make a quick comment before we move to the rest of the agenda? Again, lots to digest, but that we need to hear now, or should we move on to the agenda? Give me a quick, somebody give me.
I just want to say, wow, 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 wow. I mean, such a huge amount of work, Maddie. That was a great presentation. And I know the EAC is talking about some tree initiatives, so that's something else we can, but it's like, especially that the electric mobility, giving people rides would just be so huge here, because a lot of people could use that.
Okay.
I just have one, maybe two comments. I want to echo what Rika said. I'm going to watch this again just to put my whole list together. I have questions, just in general, sure. But I think, Maddie, you missed one thing, and maybe I missed it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Out of all the initiatives, one that I believe, and again, I apologize if I missed it, but it's the building department. We went paperless several years ago.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
So we were talking about going.
The Parks Department is also going paperless. They started using a software system called Productive Parks. That's very true.
So we did that again from all the boards, all the land boards, from applications to all the board members, that we require one set of drawings for every member of our boards to the building department submissions. Instead of providing 3 copies of 24 by 36 papers, everything is digital. So I think that's the only thing that can come to mind, that I think among everything else that we have done as a group, I think that's the only thing. Again, that's the only thing that I have, and that's it. Everything else was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really good point. I'll add it.
Yeah, I just, again, echo everything there, because you guys are top notch. I just want to know what's going to be the name of the new car.
Well, you got to show for the picture. Mr. Lopez and I were there with it. He only had one kid in those days.
The color that we chose, that we're hoping we get from the factory, is shockingly called Blueprint, which would be so perfect for the building department. So fingers crossed we can get that one.
We'll call it blue. We actually had a little bit of a minor contest for the name, just so you know, Bob. We take everything very seriously. I think Maddie came up with the name, but I'm not sure. Anyway, listen, folks, thank you. I think we should take a look, and we really need to talk up what we do. People complain about a lot of stuff, and that's fine. That's like, why not? I mean, that's a good thing. That means they're engaged. Complaints is a sign of an engaged community. I mean, that has always been my point of view. But I think when you see it all together, It's really, it's great. And it really is based on so much community input, Green Austening's input. Everything could always be done better and this and that. I love your point, and I want it a little stronger if we go as we go forward about education. We do internships in the water. I mean, there are internships for kids, environmental science opportunities. Those gardens, I went up to Cornell when I called Karen, and I think I, talked about it years ago. You go into their parking lot, they've got like students there explaining things to you. There's signs explaining every flower. It's amazing. And they have weather issues, right? They have hills that I mean, it's beautiful. It's in Ithaca. They've got the waterfront with the lake, everything that's educational, and everything that can encourage someone to take a career in the green economy is beneficial to our community. It opens people's minds and eyes, and it's good for all generations, because every generation is a learning generation. So, and not just the kids, but so many other people. So yay, thank you. Let us move to the, and I'm going to let you get away with going over time. I'm just going to say
I apologize. I feel lousy. I was trying to talk as fast as I could.
No, you were great, but honestly, it was well worth it. It's almost joyful. I mean, for me personally, anyway. Okay, let's move. We'll probably go faster through some of these, maybe. Where are we? Village manager. I think we're on to proposed local law 2/2022. So that would probably be Stuart Kahan. Yes, I know it's your role to do it, Karen, but
That's
I'm moving
okay.
us along.
We're moving right along.
We're moving us
I'm
along
not going to
here.
waste any more time. We will go forward, but thank
Okay.
you for a wonderful presentation, and kudos to all the staff and the board members and the volunteers who make all of this possible. And with that, we are on to local laws. I'm just going to leave it at that and turn it over to Corporation Counsel.
Thank you. It's often said that you should never follow children or animal acts. I will add to that, Maddie Zahaj. So thank you for all the people who set this wonderful agenda up. Can't
Animal
thank you enough. Okay.
That was a compliment. Say thank you.
That was a very nice compliment.
Thank you, Stuart.
With a sense of humor, which is much appreciated.
Oh my God, Maddie, come on, geez. Okay, proposed local law 2 is a very minor amendment to chapter 216 so that the outdoor dining parklets can be opened on April 1st rather than May 1st, which is what I believe was the sense of the board.
Yeah.
That is frankly the only change. It's like a minor section change to just do that. I would have a resolution next week calling for a public hearing. The public hearing would be 2 weeks thereafter, and then the board could vote, and it would be in effect before April 1st. So you would meet all your dates. So that's proposed local law 2.
I think we all agreed on this, so it's a straight on yay.
Okay. I'll just dive right into the next one, which is the last item on the work session agenda, which deals with a proposal for a license agreement relating to 70A Croton Avenue. Maddie, I don't know if it's possible. The mayor had asked if we could do Google Maps.
Yeah, I want to see the property because the drawings do nothing for
If
me.
you could put in 70 Croton, we'll be able to, and then streetscape, it actually has what's up there right now. But very briefly, folks, this is the project which is next to the Valvoline location. The board had previously granted a zoning map change for this location. It has gotten through planning board. I believe it's gotten through BAR. There's no zoning amendments that are requested here. The applicant is seeking a license agreement from the village because what will happen is the molding on the front of the building, at the top of the building, will encroach into the village's right of way, essentially an air right encroachment of 5 inches, of no more than 5 inches. Basically, because it does go over the village's right of way, and this was brought to the attention of the developer by Joe Augustinelli, they are requesting the license agreement, which would allow for that. It's the green area that's there and right there. And at the top of the building, the building is not obviously fully constructed, but at the top level, there would be some molding, and that molding, as I said, will slightly come out, really slightly, 5 inches over onto the village's right of way. Essentially, I think it's 4 or 5 stories up. So it's, and that's.
Wait,
so
this
we'll
is
look at
that building that's being, so we're looking at the property before the building. Right now, there's a building with all that scaffolding and all that stuff
Correct,
on it.
ma'am, correct.
So they
correct.
didn't have enough room that they couldn't stay within their boundaries.
Well,
They're
the
like,
way that, it's just that the molding that they're putting, they are basically building up to the property line, which is permitted in that zone. The molding basically puts them 5 inches over.
up in the air.
Uh-huh, correct.
They're allowed to do
encroachment-
4 to 5 stories there?
I don't
The
remember.
height is right?
Yes, everything, they, you know, all that they have done, the answer to that is yes. I don't know, I may be misstating the number of stories, but it is, you know, it's going to have the units, it will have parking at the bottom, so that's what they're looking for.
All right, anybody have any, I mean, we pass by there a lot. It's sort of weird that Google doesn't pick up the new construction, but I guess it's not an actual site yet.
Okay, so
I have a question for Stuart. So no matter what the encroachment was, 1 inch or 2 inches or 5 inches, it's still, we need a licensing agreement.
Yes, I'll give you an example, Trustee Fritchie. Across the street from the municipal building, a gentleman built a series of garages across the street. One corner of that garage extended 8 inches onto the village's right of way. Now, he had already built it, so he actually had to shave off those 8 inches. So the answer is yes. No matter where it is, if it goes across our property, it's essentially an encroachment.
Yeah, and I actually since I am, excuse me, liaison to the planning board, I was on the meeting last 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, when they talked about this, and it's, JB, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 30, maybe 40 feet up in the air. It's not a tripping hazard by far. It's just the way to design a building. It's basically a stucco trim or something that's up on top of the building. That was quite a discussion for a while, correct? Right?
Thank you, Jaime.
Yeah, the building is about 39 feet from the front grade, and less than that from the back grade. So it's that district allows buildings to go up to 36 feet from the grade plane, which is a complicated term that I don't think anybody really wants to get into right now. But it is compliant from a height standpoint. It's 3 stories high. And the building right now is a cast concrete building, which is going to have stucco and everything else attached to the front of it. So it's 3 inches setback from the property line today. They need another 8 inches to finish off the facade. So that's how they determined that they were going to need 5 inches. And so as Stuart mentioned, some of that is the overhang at the top of the parapet, and some of that is just sort of like fascia. There's small lights that are on the front of the building that are going to encroach a little bit. And so I think for the average person, it's only going to feel like it's encroaching 1 or 2 inches, but there are places where it extends farther out because of the ornamentation on the facade.
Okay, anybody else have any comments? Anybody have a point of view? Why did this come to us this afternoon? Is there a rush about this? I don't understand why we're getting stuff like that.
Well, Mayor, it didn't come this afternoon. It was in the agenda on Friday. When the agenda was sent around, it was there with the attachment.
Okay,
The only
I
thing
didn't
that
see
was
it.
not there today was the last 2 attachments, which specifically delineated.
Oh, okay.
But this was there. We're reaching sort of, we're approaching hopefully the end of the land use process. So at some point, they want to know that they'll be able to do what they need to do.
Okay,
Well, the land use process is over at this point. They got zoning variances for some issues of building coverage. They're compliant with the impervious coverage. They had a setback variance that they needed because of the building being too close to the residential zone adjacent to it. They received those variances. They've received their site plan amendment from the original approval that was under the Baker brothers, and they've received their BAR approval. At this point, there are some outstanding engineering questions. And so we have a third-party reviewer doing the engineering review, or about to commence to the third party to the engineering review.
Jaime, so that's, I'm sorry. So, I did watch the planning board meeting myself as well, but correct me if I'm mistaken. So the last things that you mentioned, those actually fall under the building inspector's purview. So that has nothing
Correct.
to do with planning. So let's not bring that over and what we are talking about here. One of the conditional use, one of the conditions that the planning board had is actually this, what is in front of us right now, correct?
No, I don't believe so, sir. I think that what's in front of you is a license agreement
I
to
can
have.
go back to I could be mistaken, but my recollection.
I only
one
mean
of
it
the
to say that
conditions-
there's no conditional permit that allows for the construction of anything on.
No, I'm
village
talking
property.
about right now that what they're coming in front of us for the 5 inches that are going to be in village property. My recollection, and again, I could be mistaken, that was one of the conditions that the architecture or the planning board had requested.
Correct.
In
That is
any
correct.
regards. Okay, so that is correct. That's what
That's
I'm asking.
correct.
Okay,
You are
so
correct.
without us approving this, they have nothing, correct? They'll have to go back and figure something else out, correct?
If you did not give them this, they would have to shave the building back and
Correct.
put the facade.
That's what I'm saying. They have to figure something else out. Okay. So looking at the section that was provided to us early this afternoon, I do not have any objections to this because it's so minor that you won't even see it. And it's just a portion of the base of the building itself. So me personally, I don't see it. It's like when I want to look at it the same way in a way we look at awnings. Sure, they come in front of us because they're actually projecting from the building into the right of way of the sidewalk, which is the right of way of the village. So that's sort of what I'm thinking, at least for me. So me personally, I don't have an objection to what this request is being, the request is in front of us right now.
So I'm on the same page as Manny. My next question is, what is stopping them right now from moving on with construction if they've got all these approvals? It's probably over a year now, right? I know it hasn't been a pretty path, but is there a major hurdle now that we don't know about that's going to stop this project from moving forward?
We have there's a structural engineering issue that has to get resolved. They recently provided information to us, and we are going to have a third-party consultant review that information. So that has to get resolved before they can essentially go ahead and get their permit.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? You guys are good? Dana, is that a thinking look or you wanted to say something?
No, it's a thinking look.
Okay.
I'll be glad when it's done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to understand any of this. All I know is you build a new construction, you should get it right. And this isn't all on the village. It's also on how this construction was done and how close it is to the sidewalk. This has not been a smooth ride, but I'm not going to really blame the folks in the village or the village staff. We have to be really careful always when new construction goes up. We all live here, everybody in this gallery, and driving through this, almost everybody, we drive through this. It's really close to where people walk. This isn't on some prairie land. And I always feel like you build new construction, you should get it right the first time and not keep having to encroach here and encroach there. I would like to get it done, but I'm not going to have anybody rush it. If there are problems, there are problems, and that's it. So as far as I'm concerned, people should continue doing what they're doing. I don't have a problem with 5 inches on air rights. I just have a problem principle with people who build things and continue to sort of push on the edges instead of doing it, in my opinion, the way it should be done in the first place. But if it follows all the rules and everybody's doing their job and being thoughtful about it, then who am I to disagree with it on this particular project? I've certainly disagreed on others, unless somebody objects, which I'm not hearing, and we need to have a majority that says, let's get it forward, which I think we do have. So let's move it forward, folks,
Thank you.
and go on to the next item.
That is the last item, Mayor.
Oh, I'm looking at the agenda. Sorry. Okay, we are adjourning to go into something. Is it legal or exec?
I don't think there's either tonight, Mayor.
I thought there was.
No, we.
Okay.
No, the
remember we
person that you
postponed it
wanted to
next-
speak with tonight was not available, so
Oh,
he'll
I'm
be here
sorry.
next
Right, and I
week.
saw the email. I thought it was something else. Okay, sorry about that. Maddie, we can go back and talk about all the environmental stuff. We got
I was
at
gonna
least,
say, you ready for the next?
we
ready for the
got
next
33
slide?
minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. 10:27. And I think we need to get a vote to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ladies and gentlemen, good night. And we will
Night.
see you next Wednesday. Have a good one.